Welcome to Classic Trials. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we make sense of the law one bite at a time. In this series, we observe and analyze the play-by-play of some of the biggest trials that have shaped the public consciousness of the American judicial system. In this season, we're working our way through the case of California v. Erik and Lyle Menendez. Growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, and then Beverly Hills, California, these young men had everything they could ever want, or so it seemed, until one night on August 20th, 1989, they approached Jose and Kitty Menendez with newly purchased shotguns. Put on trial for murdering their own parents, they claimed self-defense, arguing they were terrorized in their own home by abusive parents until they could take no more. Which argument is more convincing? Come join and see for yourself. Hello, hello. Happy Monday. It's another Menendez Monday. So I have some attentive pets that I think I have officially trained to come join me at my desk. Basically every time, even now when I'm not live streaming, it's like they see me sitting here at the desk with my computer and screens. And they just automatically excitedly run in oh, is it treat time? So it's really, really funny. So anyway, I hope that you guys had a great weekend. And I hope that you guys have a wonderful Monday. If it's already off to a start, we've got people watching in different time zones. And where did you go? Oh, you're coming over here for more Tritos. Well, that's not the ideal. I wanted you sitting on the chair. Come on. We need to put the whole image for everybody. Anyway, so we got another Menendez Monday today. We've got the little critters here with us, and we've got some testimony to watch. And yeah, so it's going to be, I have listed in the description, I have two witnesses listed. I've got Diane Vander Molen, one of the cousins who started her testimony last week. We didn't get to her cross-examination yet, so how's that going to go? I don't know. We'll see. But I expect that there's going to be some questions that are similar to what we saw with Kathleen last week, the other cousin that we heard from, and Diane's sister. And what was I going to say? So I think that we'll probably get some questions similar to what you got that has to do with Kitty being an abuse victim, which is, of course, what the prosecution wants to do. They want to paint Kitty as a victim, definitely not an abuser, because the more that she looks like an abuser, the more it looks like there's a justified killing, at the very least emotionally, if not legally, right? And because when we're talking about jurors, regardless of what the law says, the jurors are the ones that are applying the law to the fact. They are the fact finders here. So if they think that this is a justified killing based on the facts, then that is up to the jury, right? So to a certain extent, that's one of the reasons why trials are often this unknown thing for a lot of lawyers. They feel very uncertain putting the decision of a case in the hands of 12 angry men. Obviously it's not men only nowadays, but you know what I mean? 12 people that are supposed to be peers, that are, your average person that lives in the jurisdiction that you're practicing in. Do you trust your case with these people that have their own minds, their own opinions, and their own biases that they bring into the courtroom, that hopefully have been accounted for? So anyway, emotion plays a lot into it. And the more that Kitty looks like a bad person, the worse it is for the prosecution and the better it is for the defense. So we're probably going to hear about that. We also are going to hear, there's going to be just a tiny bit, part of it, actually, most of what we're going to see today is from Cynthia McPhee, the ex-lover and live-in babysitter for Dr. Oziel. So we're going to get back to some Oziel spice today. Most of today with her is actually going to be her testimony during a hearing. There's going to be 15 minutes of testimony from her hearing. And then the judge is going to really truncate what she can talk about in front of the jury. And there's going to be very short testimony of her in front of the jury. So we'll see that. And then we'll actually see at least one more, if not two more. It might go a little bit longer today than it has in the past, but that'll be Charles Wadlington, the former tennis coach, or another former tennis coach of the Menendez brothers. So there, it's probably going to be very focused on Jose, on how tough he was on the kids, as they were, while they were kids or high schoolers or whatever stage of life that they were in at that time. So I fully expect it to be that. And if we can get to it, maybe we will hear from Meredith Geisler, who was a lifeguard in New Jersey at one of the country clubs that they would frequent. So if we've got the stamina for it today, if we can get through it, we will, we'll see. So with that, I probably should get to it. But first, Mountain Princess 207, thank you so much for gifting a Legalbytes membership. That is so kind and so generous of you. And Christina M, welcome to Bite Club. If you are if you're available on Fridays, we do a members only live stream that's just like a casual thing, usually for like about an hour. Sometimes it goes longer. This week though, I might have to waive off of it because I will be traveling Thursday-ish, Friday. I've got to look at my dates and all that kind of stuff, but I've got an occasion this weekend. I've got a family graduation that I'm going to this weekend, back in the States. So I might have to waive off on the members only stream this Friday. We'll see. I don't want to disappoint people though. So, okay. Anyway. All right. Enough chitter chatter. Let's get to it. Andy, take your spot. Yeah. Oh, you're such a good girl. Okay. All right. There we go. And oh yeah, here we go.
And would you say your name again for us?
Diane Vander Molen.
All right, I'll remind you, you're still under oath. You may continue your direct examination.
Thank you, Diane. Good morning. Good morning. Ms. Vander Molen, we were talking yesterday, late in the day, about the incident in which Lyle came down to your room and told you about what was happening with him and his father. Is that correct?
Yes.
And was that in 1976?
Yes, it was.
Your Honor, I have two additional exhibits I'd like to mark.
The next exhibit number is 168.
168, I'm marking 168, which is a class picture for Cherry Lane School, 1976-1977, and an individual photograph of Lyle Menendez, which I'll mark as 169. Ms. Vander Molen showing you these two photographs. Do you recognize who that person is?
Yes, it's Lyle. Yes, it's Lyle.
And
Right.
does
Mr.
this
Bites
appear
is
to
home,
be the
apparently.
age that he was at the time that he made the complaint to you that you told us about?
Yes,
And
pretty much.
also, yes, Dalabar, thank you so much for the reminder. Might want to put up a trigger warning already. Yes. Thank you. So I know we haven't even gotten into it. I keep saying we're going to start. We are inevitably going to be getting into more details of different forms of abuse. So, I know that we've got a lot of survivors in this community. So if this is triggering for you, it may be triggering for some. So if you are having a negative emotional response to it, there's no need to hang around. If you're feeling that, take a step away, go outside, go for a walk, cuddle some fur babies, do whatever you need to do. Do whatever you need to do for your own mental health. It's not this live stream is not worth it. So, okay. So yes, Dalabar, thank you so much. And I'm going to leave this up for a minute too. And I might actually save it even. Let's see. And Mountain Princess 207, thanks so much for the YouTube member chat. Finally pizza. And I hit that like button. Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, he's a good trigger warning here. Thank you, Sandra. And yeah, Mountain Princess 207. Wonderful. You've been a member for, I think that's 6 months now. So that's awesome. Love it. Okay. All right. Let's get going.
after that incident, when is the next time you ever talked about it?
January of 1992
And
A long time.
who did you talk about it?
to yourself
And where was this?
In your office?
in Denver.
Is that where you live?
Yes.
When the boys were growing up, were they given any lessons regarding the importance of their family heritage?
Yes, they both were by both Kitty and Jose. Jose used to talk about the special heritage that they were descended from and their need to carry on that heritage and to live up to it. And also Kitty used to talk about the special family that we came from and the importance of it.
And was there any emphasis on particular future plans? You should contribute to humanity or be an artist, or what was the goal that was given for these boys in terms of what they should do with their life?
Above and beyond anyone else. That's as close as I can. It was.
Okay. And were things like money and houses and cars and friends important?
That was a given.
What do you mean that was a given?
That was what was going to be their future, was all of that. The
house
status,
or a big
the
house?
highest status, the highest, the biggest, the most.
And were these values that you saw reflected in the parents in front of the boys?
With everything they were doing, yes.
And were they given instructions regarding choosing friends and what kind of people were the right people to have as friends?
Yes, I remember specifically at it, the dinner table, Jose and Kitty telling the boys how sometimes they may not like it if they chose who they could spend time with or not, or who their schoolmates could be they could be friends with at school, but that they had to understand how important it was that these friends would become known by them, and they would their life would be influenced by them, and how important it was that they direct themselves, even from a very young age, to be with the right people.
And did Kitty and Jose seem to incorporate that in their own lifestyle as well?
Sustained.
Did Kitty and Jose ever talk about their own selection of friends in front of the boys? That is, the parents' friends.
Sustained.
Well, she's still giving some kind of an answer, though, because
Your
she's
sister
nodding
testified
along.
yesterday that she had stayed with the Menendez family for part of a summer when you were there. Is that
In
correct?
1976,
And you are one of 5 children, is that correct?
yes.
And did any of your other brothers or sisters stay at the Menendez house?
No,
And your cousin Alan, Brian Allen, but uses Alan,
Alan.
testified before you. Does he live in the same state as you?
no.
How long had it been since you had seen him before you saw him here this week?
It's been years.
In his years, 2 years or 5 years? Or?
I saw him in Princeton at the funeral, and prior to that, it had been when my son was born in 1984.
Do you talk to him regularly on the phone?
No, we do not.
And do you see your sister on a regular basis?
No, I do not.
You had told us yesterday about a friend of Erik's named Andy. Is
Yes,
that correct? And,
also a cousin,
okay, and whose child is he?
Martes.
And now, did Andy stay for months at a time as you did? Or would he just come and visit, or do you know?
There was one time when he came for a couple of weeks, I think it was, but generally his visits were overnight visits once they moved into the area.
Do you remember an incident in 1983 in which Erik ran away?
Yes, the beginning of the summer in 1983.
And was there anything unusual about what happened?
There was because he'd been gone for quite some time. And, okay.
Your Honor, I'd like to mark this next in order.
170.
Thank you. Showing you that it was marked as 170. Does that look familiar to you?
Yes, it does.
And what is that?
That is a picture of Lyle and Erik in their canoe on the lake that they lived on.
Okay, now, was this a lake that was near their house?
Yes, their property bordered on the lake.
And you indicated that Erik ran away and there was a panic.
Yes.
And did the canoe have anything to do with it?
They, in looking for him,
They,
I'm sorry, Kitty and Jose
okay,
discovered that the canoe was missing.
okay. And what happened?
Jose took off in search of Erik and found him. They lived on the edge of the lake, and there was a creek that took off from there that fed into it. And Jose was gone for a while, and it was about dark when they got back, and Jose was furious, and Erik appeared to be crying. It was at the state of crying, if not crying still, and they were both soaking wet.
And were you ever told anything about what had happened?
You can answer that yes or no.
Was it ever explained to you what had happened?
Only where he had found him.
Okay. But not why he ran away or
No,
what had happened?
no.
You talked yesterday a little bit about Lyle and his stuffed animals.
Yes.
And did you see him interacting with the stuffed animals on all of your visits, or did it just happen during one of them?
Oops, sorry. On all of them.
Okay, so in your last visit when he was 14, he was still involved with the stuffed animals.
Yes.
And you said he would threaten Erik with Cookie Monster. Now, did he assault him with
No,
the animal?
it was a playful, joking, teasing type of interaction between the two of them.
And if Erik got mad at Lyle, would he take it out on the animals ever?
Yes.
What would he do?
He one time threw Cookie Monster out the window.
Okay. And was that very upsetting to Lyle?
Yes, it was.
When you were staying with them, did you ever have any discussions with Kitty about what your future was supposed to be?
She pretty much informed me what my future was going to be.
And was this done in front of the boys?
Yes.
And what was your future going to be?
Sustained.
Was she talking about your educational future, your career future?
Both.
Objection irrelevancy.
Objection sustained.
She already answered.
Since you were living with the family, were some of the expectations that the boys experienced passed along to you?
Yes.
Irrelevant.
Sustained.
Was there ever an occasion in which Kitty, in front of the boys, lied about your academics?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Did Kitty ever tell people in front of...
Oh no, sound went out.
Sustained.
May we approach, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. You've told us about observing situations in which Kitty appeared to be dominated by Jose and intimidated by him. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, was that how she behaved with other people in front of the boys?
No.
And how would she behave with other people other than her husband?
She always gave the appearance of being in control and being the authority.
I'm sorry.
Of being the authority with the boys, with other people.
One more time.
Being the authority with the boys, with other people.
Thank you. Did she seem to have a strong personality?
Yes.
Calls for speculation, which is like.
Can you be more specific as to what you're referring to? Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did she appear to have her own views and to express them without any reservation?
Yes.
At what time or in what interaction or
During
relationship?
any of your visits, did you observe her in the presence of the boys express Strong opinions have strong views.
Question vague as to whether or not Mr. Menendez was there.
No, this is out of his presence, Your Honor.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Yes, out of his presence. Do you want me to ask you the question?
Yes, please.
Did you observe in any of your visits, and I will ask you which visits later, Kitty expressing strong views, being a dominant kind of person when Jose wasn't there?
Yes,
Now, was that an unusual occurrence, or was that what happened all the time?
that was how she was without him in her presence.
Okay. And was this during just one particular visit, or was it a pattern?
It was a pattern.
So it happened during all of the visits?
Yes.
Did she seem happy about having children?
No.
Did she talk to you about the damage children can do to a marriage?
Yes, she did.
Her hearsay with the start.
Sustain, the answer stricken.
Did she talk to you in front of the boys about the damage children can do to a marriage?
She told me that children drive a wedge between their man and his wife, or husband and wife.
Was that in front of the
Both.
defendants? Was that said in front of the defendants?
Both.
Did it happen on more than one occasion?
Yes.
Yikes. That sucks to hear from your parent. Even if it is
When
kind of true sometimes.
Jose would have, did he ever have a,
Wait, one second.
I didn't hear that last response at all. I didn't hear the question.
Okay, let's have it read back.
Okay.
So, I mean, you can
Did
acknowledge.
she talk to you in front of the boys about the damage children can do to a marriage? Answer, yes. She told me that children drive a wedge between a man and his wife, or a husband and wife. Report, was that in front of the defendants? Answer, both.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I mean, so yeah,
did you
children do
ever have
put
an
stress on a
occasion to
marriage,
have a conversation?
right? Like children do put stress on a marriage. This is like well known, well accepted. Whether you have kids or you've seen, like friends or family of yours with kids, that like it can put stress on the marriage. But like to say that in front of your kid, that like they are the source of your discord with your spouse is like, especially when they're really young, is really shitty to do, because it just makes them feel like their entire existence is a negative thing. And like, who wants to hear that from their own parent? Like, that's terrible. That's terrible.
Conversation with Jose one-on-one, the way that he would have those conversations with his sons.
There was one time when he was dropping me off on his way to work at the bus. Okay.
Will they answer part?
Objection sustained, the answer is stricken.
Okay.
Was there a particular form of physical behavior that would take place when Jose was talking to someone?
Yes.
Objection irrelevant.
And
Right.
Overruled.
did you observe this when he was having conversations with his sons?
Yes.
And did that ever happen to you? Did he ever have conversations with you one-on-one where there was a physical sense?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe for me what it was? How would he sit? How would he look?
First of all, the first thing that comes to my mind is that his head would look down at you, and that there was this sideways glance.
Would he be close to you? Or close to
He would
them?
turn his head into you, depending on where you were sitting. Yes.
And would there be a difference depending upon who was speaking, whether he would look at you or look away? If you remember? Would he look at you?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
When he was talking to you, would he look at you?
Objection irrelevant.
Talking in general or specific instances or what?
Well, do you remember any specific instances
He would look away.
when he was talking to you or when you were talking to him? Have I confused you thoroughly?
Yes.
During a conversation, he would speak and say one of the boys would speak.
Mhm.
Okay? When Jose was speaking to one of the boys, would he be looking at them?
Yes.
When the boys responded or when you responded, would he continue to look at you or would he look away?
Objection irrelevant.
Let's confine it to conversations with the defendants.
Okay.
Form of the question.
If you saw.
Do you understand the question?
Yes. He would continue to look at them.
And was there something very intense about these conversations?
Objection calls for conclusion on part of the witness irrelevant.
Well, it's also vague. Objection sustained.
Yeah.
During the conversations you observed with the two boys, with Lyle and Erik, did the conversations appear to be of a lighthearted nature? People were joking, or did they appear to be very serious? How
No,
did they
it was
appear?
serious.
Well, objection sustained. The answer is stricken. Again, it's vague. We're talking about every conversation, what time frame, things of
Yeah.
that nature.
During any of the visits, did you see one-on-one conversations between Jose and either of the boys?
Yes.
And did these occur on a regular basis?
Yes.
And when they occurred, were they always the same mood, or were there different types of conversations like this?
There were different types, but generally, in the context that we're talking about, they were serious, and the boys were intent on paying attention.
And was it the type of
That was a good
situation
recovery.
where you could interrupt or join in?
No.
That was a good recovery of this direct testament because you could tell that she was really struggling. She was kind of asking these like sort of like broad questions about like what was the mood like, what was, you know, like, which is important for her side to get out of this witness so that the jury can understand like this is typically what would happen, this is how things looked and felt. But like what she needed to do was kind of like narrow this down into parts that she could kind of lead. I mean, without not leading the witness, but sort of lead the conversation so that you are getting to the question that you want to get to, but everybody understands how you're getting there. So that was it. That was a good recovery of like objection after objection after objection of like, nope, you're vague. You're calling for, you're asking for conclusions about other people's mindsets and like all this kind of stuff. So, you know, she was able to kind of like take a step back and just sort of like narrow it down and just lead from one to the next to the next. That was good.
Do you remember anything about a belt that was a particular object in that house of some importance?
Objection asked and answered.
We are going to bring this back up.
I haven't asked this witness about the belt, Your Honor.
I believe you have, but objection, if you have something else to go on with this witness, I'll permit you to explore it.
Do you remember you remember the belt?
Yes, I do.
What do you remember about the belt?
I remember seeing it always sitting doubled over. It was doubled over and then lapped over on the top of Jose's dresser.
Okay. Do you have any other memories of that belt?
Not at this moment.
You never saw it used on the boys. Is that correct?
Not to my recollection, no.
And punishment always took place behind closed doors. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were you allowed to go down near the boys' rooms when Jose was in the room with his
Objection
sons?
asked and answered.
Sustained.
Yeah.
Do you think you were treated badly in the later visits that you had with this family?
Jose, who's the conclusion.
Sustained.
Your Honor, it's foundational. When you left in 1983, were you still on good terms with the family?
I was extremely unhappy.
And did you ever ask to go back?
No, I did not.
And did you, after you left, engage in some activity which you thought would have met their approval?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Was their approval of you important even long after you left?
Yes.
Irrelevant.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
After 1983, when is the next time that you saw Lyle and Erik Menendez?
At the memorial service in 1989.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Wait,
Right.
what was the last question we read? Please? Not the answer to this question.
Oh, yeah.
Please, yeah.
I've already asked. I've already asked.
I've already asked him. Sometimes these microphones are like really sensitive. They pick up everything.
When is the next time that you saw Lyle and Erik Menendez?
Thank you.
Right.
Your Honor, we do have the video that 8mm has now been put on video, and
Okay, well, let's have the examination here first, and then we can come back to that. All right, is there any further direct examination on behalf of Erik Menendez?
All right.
All right,
Cross-examination.
Cross-examination.
Ms. Vander Molen, I believe you've indicated that you had approximately 4 visits in the Menendez home. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And the first one was 1976, and it was something I think you testified that was you had been looking forward to.
Yes.
How would you categorize your stay that summer? Did you have a good time or a bad time, or was it mixed, or how was it?
That summer, it was a good time.
Okay. Were you treated well by Mrs. Menendez that summer?
Yes.
And how about Mr. Menendez? Did he treat you well?
I really did not develop a relationship, whether I can comment on that.
Was he around a lot during that summer that you recall?
He was frequently gone on trips, business trips during that time.
And when he was gone on business trips, would that be during the week, or would it include weekends, or can you recall?
It's tough to recall. I remember that he was gone a lot that summer, and there was really not that much interaction between he and I that summer.
And by the way, Sandra Ramirez, thank you so much for gifting 10 Legalbytes memberships. Very, very kind and generous of you. I know you've done that a ton in the past, and I just appreciate the heck out of it. So Arto Rissanen, Diane M, Tori Rudiger, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Gamer Deco, Bronwyn W, Chris and Sam, Creative Apple, June B, Jessica Crago, DS, and Paluchu, I think is probably how you pronounce that. Welcome to Bike Club. So I hope you guys enjoy being members for the month. So thank you, Sandra. And let's continue on.
Now, your sister was with you that summer for a period of about 2 months. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did your
Oh, and Martha W, no, you have not missed any commentary on this rad jacket, because we literally just started the cross-examination. I kind of love it. I don't know if I love it as a jacket. As a blouse, I would really love it, but I don't know. It's fun though.
Did your sister ever complain to you about not being happy there that summer?
Yes, a lot.
But you were happy, correct?
Yes.
And you went on trips during that summer
Yes, we did.
to Washington, D.C. and to New York.
Right.
And did you have a close relationship with the defendants during that summer as well?
Yes.
Did you spend time with them?
We did things together.
Did you ever do
Right.
things together with either one of the defendants without the parents being present? In other words, did you play with them or talk with them?
Yes.
Okay. And so during that summer, you had a separate relationship with the defendants that did not always include the parents?
Yes.
Were you loving towards them?
Yes.
Did you ever hug them or kiss them or anything?
To the best of my recollection. Yes.
Then I believe when you left in August of 1976, you went home to where? Where did you?
To Arizona.
And then in the summer of 1978, from June the 1st until the 3rd week of September, you were again at the Menendez home. Is that correct?
Can you repeat the question, please?
All right. Between June 1st and the 3rd week of September of 1978, that was your second visit. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it was 2 summers after your first visit.
Yes.
Was that in the same house or was that in a different house?
That was in a different house.
And was that the Princeton Junction house?
Yes, and then we moved into the Pennington house.
How would you categorize your stay during that summer?
It was more or less a working Kitty had a carpet cleaning business that I was employed in. And we were also busy making decisions on the house that was being built in Pennington and moving into it.
All right, so you were actually employed that summer, is that correct?
Yes,
And what year
That'll
were you
change the
born in?
relationship.
1959.
So you were being paid, is that correct?
Yes, I was working approximately 20 hours a week.
Now, when you returned that second time in the summer of 1978, were you looking forward to going back?
Yes,
Then I believe the third time you stayed was the following summer, but it was only for 2 weeks. Is that correct?
correct.
During your second visit, how would you categorize your time there? Did you have keeping in mind that you were working, did you still have a good time or did you have a bad time? Or
I'm pretty neutral on how I felt either way.
All right. Now, between the summer of 76 and the summer of 78, did you have any other contact with the Menendez family? In other words, did you ever visit or speak with them on the phone or anything like that?
I spoke with them on the phone. Yes,
Were you invited back for the summer of 78?
yes.
And at the time that you were invited back, did you know that you would be working in the carpet cleaning business?
I don't believe I did.
Oh,
Who paid your way from Arizona to Princeton? Do you recall the second summer?
My mother probably paid it. It would have either been myself or my mother.
And you were about 19 years old that summer, is that correct?
Yes.
Then the third week, I believe, when you went to the third summer when you went in 1979, did you go with a friend?
Yes.
And were you invited that time?
We asked if we could come and we were told yes.
And that was a girlfriend of yours named Karen?
Yes.
And the Menendezes allowed you to come and stay for a couple of weeks?
Yes.
Now, during the first, the second, or the third summer, did you ever get charged rent or anything like that?
No.
You were a guest.
Yes.
The third summer, did you have a nice time while you were there, the 2 weeks? 1979, when you were with Karen.
Yes. It does housekeeping and gardening and so forth qualify for rental purposes.
Well, so you were asked to do chores. Is that correct?
To the nth degree.
And was that all the 3 times that we've been talking about?
Yes, increasingly so with each visit.
Okay. And by the summer of 1979, you were 20 years old. Is that correct?
Yes.
Then your last visit occurred from June of 82 until July of 83. Is that correct?
June of 82 to July of 83, yes.
All right. And at that time, you were more than just a summer house guest, correct?
Correct.
You were living there?
Yes.
And that was considered your residence during that period of time, correct?
Yes, it was.
Were you working?
I was working and going to school and maintaining the housekeeping and gardening and chauffeuring of the children.
Okay. Was it your
Whoa.
understanding when you went to live there that you would be required to do chores and housekeeping and things like that?
I anticipated helping. If I may answer fully,
Sure.
they had a housekeeper that came 2 days a week that was cut back to 1/2 day upon my arrival.
huh.
I was required to do all the maintenance around the yard work, which was a large yard.
See, here's the thing. The prosecution wants to characterize this as just chores. Like, these are just normal chores that, say a young person might be assigned to do for the family, by parents, by aunts and uncles. Like, that's one thing. But if it starts to look like this is an employment kind of situation, like she is coming in to be the help, that's a different kind of context. It's a very different vibe. I have no idea why the prosecution is going down this route right now, because I feel like this is only adding another layer of this whole relationship, this whole experience that doesn't help the prosecution so far. Like this, I think helps the defense to hear like this answer right here that she says that there was a housekeeper that was coming in twice a week. Upon her arrival, the housekeeper was cut down to a half a day once a week. which basically like the implication is, I mean, what she's already said that she did housekeeping, she did gardening, she did chauffeuring and all this other stuff. And like, so what she's saying, it doesn't take, more than 2 brain cells to rub together to figure out that she arrived and Kitty and Jose were like, oh, great. We don't need to pay our housekeeper as much anymore. We can cut her down to 25% of her normal time. And we can put this one to work so that she's, living with us or what have you. And so now, of course, the question is going to be, did you pay rent? And she's probably going to say no. And so she's going to be like, oh, okay. Yeah. Cause you're there as their guest. Right. I don't know why the prosecution is going down this route. Maybe things will look better as we're going through. But as I pause this right now, I feel like this is only helping the defense.
And also work full time and be responsible for taking the children to a lot of their tennis practices in Northeast Philadelphia after they got out of school, and also going to school.
Now,
Wow,
by the
that's a
summer
lot.
of 1982, when you arrived, had the family atmosphere changed from the first time you'd been there?
Yes, it had.
Okay. Why didn't you leave?
When I first arrived, I had no vehicle, and I'm not the type of person to give up, and I wanted to try to make something work of this, and I wanted to try to live back east. And it took me several months I had 5 major goals, and it took me, which involved getting a car, getting money, getting a job, getting back into school, and so forth. And I was accomplishing those. And as soon as I was able, I moved out.
So again, I don't know why the prosecution is going down this route, because this just highlighted for us just how disadvantageous she was in her relative role here. She was in a very disadvantageous position to be entering into the Menendez household. She had no car, she had no money, she had no job, she had no, she did not have the things that a young adult would need in order to be independent and to be able to set up boundaries and to be able to, especially when they are entering into a toxic atmosphere. She's 19, 20 years old, which is very young and very impressionable. Yes, you are an adult, but there are so many ways that your brain can go awry. And it's just, I don't know why prosecution's going down this route.
All right, so you weren't happy there, but you stayed anyway. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, going back to the summer of
And the prosecution is trying to paint this as you chose to stay, as in this was, oh, how convenient that you would change your mind later. Right. But at the end of the day, if this was so terrible, why didn't you leave? Again, a lot of the conversation that we have is how the concept of abuse has changed for a lot of people, for society, and what we expect of certain behaviors in the face of abuse. And it feels kind of victim blaming right now that the prosecution is why didn't you just leave? All of the reasons, basically money, transportation, the ability to get housing, time, all kinds of reasons, plus the fact that she is she said, her personality type is one that she doesn't like to give up on situations. So it's
summer of 1976. I believe you've indicated during that time period that the defendants were engaged in sporting activities. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the father
Carol, I agree.
engaged in those activities with them in terms of either coaching them or taking them. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the mother as well.
Yes.
Were you ever included in any of the sporting activities?
No, I was not.
While you were staying there during any of these 4 visits, did anyone ever hit you?
No.
Did you ever see either of the defendants hit by either of their parents during any of those 4 visits?
I saw Kitty shake Lyle physically.
How many times?
A few. In 1982-83 visit.
Prior to that time, had you seen either one of the defendants hit by their mother or their father?
I do not recall.
Did Mrs. Menendez appear to be under more stress as the years went on?
Yes, she did.
And was her behavior different around her husband than it was around you when you were alone?
Yes.
Did she appear to have an equal relationship with her husband, or was there an inequality that you could see?
He was final authority in the household. She tried her best to stand her ground.
I believe you indicated that her personality when she wasn't around her husband is that she had opinions and things like that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. With her husband, was she equally as strong-willed or opinionated?
She had definite opinions, but his was the final word.
And so she would acquiesce to him. Is that correct? She would give in to him?
Yes.
In 1976, when you were there the first time, you had a good time, and then in 1978, you still had a good time, except you were working, correct?
Right. Well, my relationship with Kitty was more or less it was real busy, and we just were constantly on the go, all of us.
And did you get along with her during the summer of 78?
I would say for the most part, but there was a lot of frustration already building within her that made it tough to feel close to her.
Were you sad when she died?
Yes.
Now, you've testified, and I've asked you as well about the fact that there was a lot of emphasis placed on sports. Is that correct in this family?
Yes.
Were Lyle and Erik good tennis players that you could see?
Yes.
And did they also appear to be able to speak on different topics? In other words, were they able to converse on different kinds of intellectual topics?
I object to some of the questions and the.
Okay, did Lyle Menendez appear to be able to speak on certain intellectual topics with his father in your presence?
Yes.
How about Erik Menendez?
Yes, although the more emphasis was given to Lyle regarding those things.
The ferret that you've identified in one of the photographs, was that a family
I
pet?
forgot about the.
Yes, it was.
Do you know whose responsibility it was to look after the ferret in terms of cleaning up after it?
Let me guess. It fell to you.
It's hard to say because the ferret pretty much had run in the house.
Well, during that period of time, was it part of your housekeeping duties to keep track of the ferret?
I think Kitty and I pretty much would be the ones that ended up picking it up.
Were there any other pets in the home during any of the 4 times that you stayed there?
Tristesse.
Okay, Tristesse,
Yes.
Tristess for the court reporter. Does that sound right?
Tristess.
Again, what was Tristesse?
Tristesse was a medium shorter dog that they had for 17 years.
And do you know when it was that Tristesse died, approximately?
Tristesse died during my 82, 83 visit, somewhere
All right.
in the middle.
So she was there during all your visits, right?
Yes.
Now, I believe you indicated that there was an incident you recall from 1976 where Lyle Menendez came to you and wanted to sleep with you. Is that correct?
Sleep in the same bedroom.
Right. And you've indicated that it was because that he made some comment to you about that. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I think your testimony is that the first time you told anyone about it, except for Kitty Menendez, was in January of 1992.
Correct.
Did you ever go to the county jail and speak with either of the defendants before talking to the defense attorneys about that statement in 1992?
Can you rephrase that question, please?
Okay. I believe it was January of 92 is the first time you told anyone else about that statement
Correct.
after it occurred.
Yes.
Okay. Prior to talking to the defense attorneys about that statement, before you talked to them, had you been to the county jail to visit either of the 2 defendants?
Yes.
Did you talk to them about it at that time?
No, I have not.
What prompted you to mention it during your talk with the defense attorneys in 1992?
Because I saw that it possibly was relevant.
Were you asked specifically a question about that?
No.
Okay. You volunteered it?
Yes.
And when you spoke to them, do you remember telling them that all you knew was that he, meaning Lyle, made some comment about Jose and touching?
What I stated was what I stated yesterday, and I have not seen what has been written
All right.
regarding that.
May I approach, please, Your Honor? Referring to page 4
Potential
of the interview of
impeachment of this
January the 15th of 1992. Okay, I'm going to ask you to read everything that's in yellow. Okay, it goes over to the next page. Let me pull this out.
So it seems she's trying to impeach her on some kind of an inconsistency.
This appears to be a paraphrasing and a summation of what I said, but not my exact words.
Ooh,
All right.
boom. There you
The
go.
report doesn't indicate anything about you gesturing towards your genitals. Is that correct?
This does not, no,
All right. And in the
although I did.
all right, all right. So you did, but the report doesn't reflect that. That's correct. Right?
Correct.
And as far as on the second page, page 5 of this, it says Diane said that she really was never sure what that was all about. And whenever she had suspicious thoughts about it, she just convinced herself that she had misunderstood or that maybe she wasn't remembering it correctly. Okay, is that what you told the defense attorneys?
Let me read this again.
Okay.
I believe that I was never sure what that was all about in reference to Kitty's reaction, and that,
Well, let me ask you.
when I had misunderstood that's a paraphrasing of me saying that I was incorrect, that I was wrong.
Okay, that you misunderstood Kitty's reaction or you misunderstood what Lyle had indicated to you?
Basically, that I had misjudged the whole situation and that I didn't want to think about it.
Now, after you heard about, or after this was told to you in 1976, you went back to the Menendez household 3 more times, correct?
Yes.
Even though you were suspicious about what had happened in 1976.
Objection, argumentative.
Rephrase the question.
Yeah.
Did you, when you went back to the house on the 3 subsequent occasions, did you just put that out of your mind, what had happened?
Yes, exactly.
Now, may I have a moment, please?
Yes.
So that was an attempt at an impeachment, but what she was using to impeach her was notes from someone else based on her telling of what had happened. So it was not her account, like she wrote it. It wasn't a report that she made or anything like that. It was, she told this to someone else. They wrote down notes on what it was. So the prosecution was trying to say like, well, you didn't, there's nothing said, like written here about you gesturing towards a certain part of your body. But she's a good witness because she was like, yeah, but I did during that conversation, whether or not they wrote it down, like basically like that's on them, not on me. I definitely did that. Yeah. So now, and now she's, the prosecution's trying to also get her on like, oh, but you still went back, which is another thing that's like, if I mean, this wasn't even an instance of her being abused. This is an instance of someone else being abused and telling her about it, which, if she feels a particular emotional connection to the brothers, that are her cousins, then she might want to go back just to be someone for them in this toxic household. So,
Yeah, sure.
All right, outside the presence of the juries, the defendants are in court and all counsel. Is there something the council want to discuss?
Yes, Your Honor, we're going to object to the use of these visiting slips on two grounds. The first is on discovery grounds.
Okay.
I think there's not a great deal of clarity in his Oziel opinion concerning discovery. And I think I should.
We're going to fast forward through this part.
Evidence. Department
Okay.
7.
Had arisen
Fast
jail.
forward, fast forward. She'll be back.
to
They
just
80.
All right, guys.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
Eagle.
Oops. Okay. All right. I think the jury can come back in now. There we go.
All right, and we'll break off the cross-examination for the moment to permit the defense to pick up on a couple matters that they forgot to deal with during earlier examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Vander Molen, were there 2 incidents which occurred during your 1982-83 visits, which are difficult for you to talk about?
Yes,
You know which 2 I'm referring to.
yes, I do.
Do you remember which event occurred first?
I do not, no.
How about we
Can
put up
you
that trigger warning again?
Tell me about them one at a time. Was there one that took place
Yeah,
in the basement?
Yes, we were downstairs playing
Who was
around.
we?
Oh, Lyle and Erik and I. And it started out as just a exaggerated play. We were all wrestling around, and somehow or another, in a very rapid transition, they began. We were wrestling, and before I knew it, they were tying me up, and they got me down to my bra, with me screaming and them being very frantically doing what they were doing.
Oh,
And
boy.
did they stop then?
Yes, they did. It stopped at that point.
And is this embarrassing to you?
Yes.
Oh,
And was there another incident that happened in front of the television set?
Yes, with Lyle and I.
And was this in the morning, the afternoon, the evening? When was it?
It was at nighttime.
He was 14 years old at this time. Is that correct?
Yes,
14.
approximately.
What room were you in?
We were in the TV room, the family room that's off the kitchen.
Was anybody else there at the time?
Erik was upstairs in his bed asleep, as far as we knew.
And where were Kitty and Jose?
They were out for the evening.
And where in the TV room were you and Lyle?
We were both laying down watching a movie right in front of the TV.
And were you lying next to each other?
Yes, parallel to each other.
oh, boy.
And what happened?
Without any words being spoken, Lyle climbed on top of me and began fondling my breasts.
And what did you do?
I froze because I had no
Were you surprised?
idea how to handle this because I was surprised. I didn't invite it, provoke it, entice it. It just came.
And what did you do?
Oh, God.
Did you stop it?
Yes, I did. It stopped.
Did you yell at him or move?
And I believe I just moved and he knew that
Did
to
that
stop.
And did it ever happen again?
No.
You testified earlier that you used to watch when the boys were taken to the swimming pool and Jose would teach them how to swim. Is that correct?
Yes.
And were you present at the time when the family would film these training sessions?
Yes.
And would it just be them swimming back and forth and diving and repeating the same behavior over and over?
They practiced diving and kick strokes and proper arm strokes.
Okay. And how long would these sessions last?
That was a
it
sharp
could go
left
on
turn into the
for
next
an
subject.
afternoon
But they-
session. Yeah, it was
like a drive-by, it felt
serious
like.
coaching on behalf of Jose, coaching the boys since he was.
Like there was no dwelling upon that subject. It was just like, oh yeah, here's these other two incidents where things happened, and here's one and here's another, and just like, okay, let's just speed right on out of here and go right into them swimming or diving or whatever. Like I was not paying attention to the first bit after that subject ended, because I was just like, what? Okay. Crazy.
A professional swimmer or
When you said go on for an afternoon, are you talking about the whole afternoon, like from 12 to 4? Or are you talking about 2 hours, or do you have an
I don't recall exactly how long, but that it would be an afternoon worth of practicing this.
Okay. Thank you. Your Honor, I have a video I'd like to show at this point in time, and we need to mark it as the next week.
And also, yeah, Carol, Lyle testified that he did this sort of thing with his mother, so assume they think that's relevant. I mean, yeah, the suggestion that we've gotten from other witnesses and other testimony so far is that is a thing that he learned with his mother. Oh. And also, while I'm paused, Sokotoa had a question earlier. Would they be asking these questions to make the jury think that Diane just wants to get back at them, like they made her work too much? Maybe, I guess. Like it seems more like the prosecution was asking the questions to try to make it look like Diane was just like some ungrateful kid that was she was invited to stay with her aunt and uncle, and then she asked to stay with them for a while, and out of the goodness of their heart, they brought her in, didn't charge her rent, didn't do any of this stuff, and so she benefited from it, and that now she's ungrateful, now she's yeah, maybe is getting some sense of revenge, but I don't think it plays that way. I really don't think that that's how it lands at all. I think she comes across very sympathetically, to me anyway. You guys might have a different opinion.
In order.
All right.
Are you gonna? Yeah, please.
All right, then if it is ready, it can be played at this time.
Everyone.
All right, if anybody has difficulty seeing it, if this is received as an exhibit later in the trial, then it would be in the jury room, and the jury would be able to see it as well at that point. All right, the tape has been played.
Whoa. We did not get to see the tape, but
I believe it to be a stipulation that this is a film that was made during 1980 of Lyle and Erik in the swimming training sessions.
Is that stipulated by both defendants?
Yes, sir.
All right, any further examination of the witness?
No. Ms. Vander Molen, did you recognize
Yes.
the people in that film?
Yes.
Who did you see?
Jose and Lyle and Erik.
All right, did you have further cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
before we do that, Care Bear, thank you so much. Says the brief video is of Jose Menendez swimming laps with his sons. So maybe it's not that the video itself was emotionally like charged, but maybe it's just like her emotions just finally caught up with her now that she's like done talking for a moment. So it just like suddenly like the emotions just like hit her while she's watching the video, maybe like because it's like she has a moment for her mind to like sit and think, as opposed to like being in the hot seat, getting asked questions, having to answer those questions. Like that may be what happened here and why she's crying. But yeah, that's, oh my God, you can like, this is real emotion. I don't think she's faking anything. I think she's being very sincere. I think she's at least coming across to me as being sincere, very honest.
I have your 6 pieces of paper. I'd like to mark them collectively as Exhibit 172.
172.
Next one, please.
Yes.
Vander Molen, I'm going to show you 6 pieces of paper and ask if you recognize these slips. They're Exhibit 172 for the record. Recognize them?
Yes.
And are these visitor slips that you filled out to visit both of the defendants, each one 3 times in 1991?
Yes, Maria and I.
All right, on one occasion it's here.
Could we move the microphone?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, why don't you get yourself set up?
And I didn't hear the answer. That was for more than just your visit? Someone else was with him?
Yes, Maria,
Maria?
the boy's grandmother.
Was that on each of the 6 visits?
I was staying with her at the Calabasas house the week that I came out with my son. And we brought my son, she and I and my son came out because the boys had met my son. They didn't know he existed until '89. So it was important to me to bring him. She drove me, and to the best of my recollection, on one visit, I know she came in because she had my son stay with a woman that she had made acquaintance with while visiting them herself.
Okay, could I ask you another question, please?
Uh-huh.
All right, did you have private visits with either or both of the defendants, or were you always with someone else on these 6 separate occasions? Do you know?
Maria and I both went, and sometimes she came in, sometimes she stayed out.
All right. Do you remember what month it was in 1991 that you had these visits?
In June.
All right, and they are not dated, but one of them has a date of June the 11th of 1991 stamped on the back. Does that refresh your memory as to about what date it was?
Sure.
What were the 3 days, if you recall?
That week, I guess it appears June 9th, June 11th, and June 12th.
Now, I believe you just testified when Ms. Lansing just started asking you questions again, that two incidents occurred during your 1982-1983 visit. Is that correct?
Yes.
When was it that you told anyone on the defense about those visits? Do you remember?
I think that they asked me if I recalled them, to the best of my...
When you told the defense attorney, who was it you told? Let me ask you that.
Joe Lansing, to the best of my knowledge.
And was that before the January 15th, 1992 discussion?
I don't recall.
Well, you told Ms. Lansing about these two
We
incidents.
discussed it on the January 1992 visit. Yes, that's when we discussed it.
You discussed it then?
Yes.
And if I were to show you the report and there's nothing in the report about that, would that refresh your memory as to when you told her?
I'm gonna get this data. I'm not sure which incident she's talking about.
All right, why don't
Okay.
you clarify exactly what it is you're referring
Okay.
to?
I'm referring to the two incidences that you just testified about, the one where you were tied up and the one where Lyle Menendez crawled on top of you.
Oh,
Okay, those two incidences, when was it
When?
that you first told the defense about them?
I do not remember.
How many interviews did you have with the defense attorneys in this case?
I interviewed with them in January, and I've interviewed with them since I've been here.
And so January of 92 was the first time? Excuse me, Honor, I believe Ms. Lansing's shaking her head.
All right, your question, please.
Do you remember when the first time was that you talked to the defense attorneys?
I spoke with them prior to their coming out in January of 1992.
And when you spoke to them prior to them coming out in January of 92, was that over the phone or in person?
Both.
So,
So I think there was one time when I was here in June
and
that I met with Jill.
and was that the June that's represented by the slips that I just showed you?
Yes,
So that would have been June of 91, correct?
yes,
And during the June of 91 visit, it was then that you told them about the incidents about being tied up and having Lyle crawl on you. Is that correct?
possibly.
Why,
I don't recall exactly when we discussed it.
why didn't you tell them about the incident in 1976 with Lyle wanting to sleep with you when you first met with him in June of 91?
Objection overruled. Objection overruled.
Your
Yeah.
Honor, what are the grounds, please?
I'm sorry?
What were the grounds?
That you mischaracterized.
Okay,
sleep.
all right. When Lyle wanted to come down and spend the night with you, and that happened in 1976, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
he'd sleep in the same bedroom.
Right, and you told us why. Now, you also indicated the first time you told anyone about that was in January of 92, correct?
Correct.
And that would have been at least your second interview with the defense attorneys, correct?
Yes,
Because you also met with them 6 months earlier, or 7 months earlier, in June of 91.
correct.
And is it your recollection now that it was June of 91 that you told them about the sexual incident with you being tied up and Lyle crawling on top of you?
We discussed it, possibly. I did not tell them. They asked me if I remembered something about it. We didn't go into any detail.
Right. During that conversation, did you tell them about what had happened in 1976 with Lyle wanting to sleep with you?
No, I did not.
Why not?
It was something that I had held within me for a long time, had not thought about. I did not know the defense. I did not know anything about the case at that point. We were talking in generalities about who my family members were when I had been out there.
Did you find out something?
So translation, she didn't trust them yet. She didn't trust them with that information yet, which is an understandable response. You know, because anytime someone has this kind of a revelation that comes out years later, it is natural to treat it with some skepticism, right? Like, why now? Why is this like why is this allegation coming out now? Why is she, why didn't she tell anyone about it earlier? Are there any other motives that might be driving this information? Maybe it's driving it to be embellished in ways so that it's more supportive for the side that she's more sympathetic to, or not. I don't know. But it's natural to be asking these questions when we're talking about allegations that come from years, decades before. And I think that it's good to be skeptical of those kinds of allegations, because there are a lot of different reasons why someone might come forward with allegations like that, but this question right here, like, why didn't you tell the defense attorneys about this earlier on when they interviewed you? And she didn't say it exactly like this, but in so many words, she just said, like, I didn't trust them yet. I didn't know them. I didn't, we were talking about generalities with the family. Like, even though this is a lawyer that is representing her cousins, a lawyer, a legal team, right? 2 legal teams. Even though they are representing their, her cousins who she cares about, obviously, and, their ability to do that impacts her cousins' lives for the rest of their lives. It's that might not be enough to motivate her ultimately to take that step to tell them this information. That is very embarrassing. That is very troubling. That is very awkward. It's uncomfortable stuff to reveal to someone that you don't actually know and you don't fully trust. So, her answer to me is reasonable.
Something about the defense that caused you to bring forth this information in January of 92?
I believe I told Jill on the phone when I knew that they were
When we
coming.
say Jill, who are you referring to?
Jill Lansing, I'm sorry. that there was something that I wanted to discuss with them when they came out.
And that was prior to the January 92 interview, is that correct?
Yes.
And at that time, had you learned something about what the defense would be that prompted you to recall or to tell this?
In the course of our interview, yes, there was something.
And is that what?
And I don't recall what it was that was said to me at this point.
But something was said to you by Ms. Lansing, is that correct?
Yes.
And that prompted you to tell her the information?
Yes.
And that was the first time then since you talked to Mrs. Menendez about it, correct?
Yes.
Now, the incidences that occurred in 1983, where you were tied up, I want to ask you about that one first. At the time, you were approximately 23 years old, is that correct?
Yes.
And at that time, the defendants were approximately 12 and 15?
They were either 11 and 14 or 12 and 15.
And they were able to tie you up, is that correct?
Yes.
Were they strong?
The entire incident started out in a playful manner, so that by the time they were tying me up, it was in a very rapid, it transitioned from being playful to embarrassing for me. And by the time it had made the transition to being embarrassing, the two of them were already in the process of having me tied up and so forth.
Were they doing it together?
Yes.
Both of them?
Yes.
And what were you doing right before it turned from being playful into serious?
Overruled.
What were you doing with them?
All right, be a little more specific, please.
What activity were you engaging in with them that turned from playful into something more serious?
I don't know that I was doing anything specific at the moment that it turned from playful to serious or embarrassing. It was never, it was embarrassing on my part. It was never serious on their part. It was more of a frenzy type moment that they transitioned into, and I stopped it at that point.
Okay, well, what were you doing right before this incident started? Were you watching TV? Were you wrestling? Were you playing Monopoly? What were you doing?
We began by having playful wrestling.
The three of you.
Yeah.
And they were adolescents at that time, is that correct?
Yes.
And then the other incident, did that occur?
Well, before she asks about that other incident, so, you know, she does ask this question about, like, she's like, you were 23, they were what, like 12, 13, something like that. And so she's like, they were able to, like, overpower you, like what? You know, it's actually a reasonable question. It has to be asked, right? Because there is an age difference between her and them. But I would say boys around teenage years, they start to really grow very quickly, get very strong. They also were tennis players. They had a rigorous physical activity schedule. So I you know, we don't know what her physical, activities, habits were at that time when she was 23. She may have been a 23-year-old, but a 23-year-old who didn't lift any weights at all. And if they were, you know, these kids that were being trained in tennis as rigorously as we have heard that they were, yeah, I could see two of them 2-on-1 overpowering her relatively quickly, especially if they have started to learn how to switch from playful to not playful, you know, like to a different, they may have been in enough experiences for them that they have experienced manipulation in that kind of a context to be able to know how to do it themselves. Anyway, okay, next one.
Before or after the incident where Lyle crawled on top of you? Was that after you were tied up or before?
I do not recall.
Did you ever report either of these incidences to anyone?
No, I did not.
Was the first time that you talked about them with anyone when you mentioned them to the defense attorneys in June of 91?
Yes.
And at the time that Lyle Menendez crawled on top of you, he was an adolescent, is that correct?
Yes,
And you were approximately
23.
at the time.
Yes,
And you had been living in the house for quite a period of time when this occurred, is that correct?
yes.
What did Mrs. Menendez look like when she was proud of her children?
What?
What kind of smile did she exhibit?
I feel like that's objectionable.
Oh, when she was proud of her children?
Yes.
Calling for speculation, maybe?
It was similar to when she got angry on it would be a smile instead of a grimace.
All right, so
When she would go like this and she'd go like this.
all right, so she would smile the same way that she would express displeasure, is that correct? In a similar type of way?
Her body movements would sit back rather than come towards you, and it would be the same clenched teeth, only it would be in a smile instead of like that. But her arms would come out to the side, and she would
God,
put her
these two
arms
are
and fists,
so
or her
close to each
hands
other.
and fists.
I feel like the fact that her two expressions of like happy versus angry are so close to one another is like also very, I don't know. I feel like that would have been triggering for the boys too, because it's like just how quickly can they flash from one to the other?
I believe you indicated on your direct examination that you recall an incident where Erik ran away from home. That's how you characterized it? Did he run away from home?
I know that he was missing. He was gone when he shouldn't have been.
Do you remember having described it earlier as the boat was missing and Erik searching for the boat?
No.
Okay, do you remember, was there another incident where the boat was missing and Erik went to look for it?
I don't recall.
May I approach, please?
Yes.
Ms. Vander Molen, have you seen any notes of the interviews that you had with the defense attorneys before testifying today?
Not for a long time.
I'm going to show you this right here, just that one sentence, and ask you if that refreshes your memory.
Could I ask counsel what she just said?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Just a second, I have to tell the attorney something. It's the supplemental notes, January the 15th. The 5th page, the 2nd paragraph from the bottom. All right, so if the characterization is that you remember the boat being missing and Erik searching for it, would that be an incorrect characterization of what your recollection is?
Yes.
Okay, so it's your recollection here today that rather than the boat being missing, it was Erik running away?
It was Erik missing, the canoe was missing, and Erik was found with the canoe.
Okay. Were there any times during the 4 times that you visited that you ever saw laughing and gaiety and lightheartedness?
Yes.
All right, could you describe which visit that was during and what that compromised or comprised, pardon me?
Yeah, what that compromised. Freudian slip?
There were moments throughout each of the visits, more so in the earlier visits than in the later visit. Generally surrounding an accomplishment that would be enjoyed for the moment.
Did you ever see the family get in bed together and talk, and you know the parents would be there and the kids would get in and you'd come and join? Did that ever happen?
The boys would join Kitty in the bed if Jose was not at home, and we would talk for a while until it was bedtime, and then I would get ready to go downstairs, and that would be when they would discuss whose turn it was to sleep with Kitty if Jose was not home. When Jose was home, I recall Jose gathering in the den with the boys until it was about bedtime. To the best of my knowledge, I can't picture all 4 of them.
All right, if I showed you a report, do you think it might refresh your recollection?
Let's show it to council first.
Does this refresh your recollection that when Jose was home, the boys and their parents would be on the bed laughing and you saw gaiety and lightheartedness? Does that refresh your memory?
I'm not sure that those are my exact words, but
Is the sentiment correct?
the den is adjoining the bedroom. So perhaps that's a blend of the two things that I was saying.
I believe you indicated on direct examination that Erik Menendez and his cousin Andy were friendly. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Is that yes?
Yes, I'm sorry.
And on several occasions, did Andy spend the night at the Menendez home?
Yes,
And did he appear to be an invited guest in the Menendez home?
yes,
And did Erik appear to have a close relationship with his cousin?
yes.
Now, did you see this occur, during which visit was it that you saw Erik close with his cousin Andy?
By the last visit, Marta and her children were living in the area. So I know it occurred then. There was an earlier visit where he was by himself staying in the home, and I'm not sure exactly when that was and for how long.
When you say by himself, what do you mean?
He was a temporary guest in the home.
All right, so prior to the summer of 82 and 83, Andy Cano came and stayed as a guest just as you had, is that correct?
Yes, not for as long of a duration though.
Do you remember about how long?
I can't tell you.
And then during 82 and 83, Andy Cano's family lived close by and he was there frequently, would that be correct?
He made several visits to the house. I can't tell you how frequently they were.
May I have a moment, please?
Yes.
Okay. In the situation that you described that occurred where you were
Tied up by the brothers, what did they tie you up with?
I don't recall.
And did they tie you to something or did they just tie your hands together? How did that occur?
My hands were tied together.
Was that in
This-
front?
I don't remember specifics because of the embarrassment involved with it. It's hard for me to recall
That's
specifically
understandable.
what took place. And I can't tell you specifics about it.
Okay, were you alone in the house with them at the time?
I would imagine so.
Okay, and after you, at some point you got,
We were in the basement by ourselves, so I can answer you that.
and they got do you had a top on? Did they get your top off?
I don't know that they took it all the way off, but it was unbuttoned, revealing my bra.
And that was the end? Did they take off your bra?
No,
And how did you get them to stop?
by insistence.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
Any redirect?
Oh, boy.
Ms. Vander Molen, you were asked about visiting at the jail.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
How many times have you been out here in California since Erik and Lyle were arrested?
Then and now.
And how long were you out for then?
Oh, approximately 1 week.
And this was June of 91?
Yes.
And you said you had your son with you?
Yes, I did.
And how old is your son?
He is now 9 years old.
And you were staying at a home in Calabasas with the boy's grandmother, Maria? Is
Yes,
that
I
correct?
was.
Now, when you went to visit at the jail, how did you get there?
Maria drove me.
And your son went with you
Yes, he did.
on each visit? Or on some?
On some of the visits, I don't recall if he was there every time. I guess he would have been there because the times that he didn't see, wasn't able to, then he stayed with that woman. So
That woman.
Now, when you visit at the jail, do you speak to someone face to face, or is there something dividing you?
we speak through a glass on the telephone.
And do you have any information about whether those this is in the jail, I take it? Is that right? The
Yes.
visits take place in the jail?
Yes,
Okay, and there are sheriffs all around?
yes,
And there are other people visiting?
yes.
Now, if you were visiting either Lyle or Erik, would they be seated directly in front of you?
They'd be across from me in a chair
Okay, and
with
there'd
a
be
phone
a glass partition?
and a glass partition between the two of us.
And would there be other people who were in jail seated on both sides of them?
Yes.
And how close do they sit? Are they 10 feet apart or?
No, I mean between the people who are in jail,
Yes.
there's just about this much space, and then the next person would be right here.
Okay, so indicating you're on approximately
Yeah,
4
not much
feet?
privacy.
It's like more like 3 feet.
3 feet? Okay. So they're about 3 feet and there are people who are in jail on both sides of them?
Yes,
And just 2 or 3 in an area, or would there be a larger number?
it depends on how many people had been called out for a visit,
Okay, but usually would there be?
but there was always some other people that they'd be called out with.
Okay. And the side that you're seated on, is it set up similarly? So there would be visitors?
For
close
each,
to you?
yes, for each person who was being visited, there was another person across through the glass that was talking to them.
And sometimes would there be more than one person visiting somebody?
Yes,
How many people can come in at a time?
I don't know. I know that you can go in 2 or 3 at least, or 4 since we've now had 4.
Okay. And when you talk on the phone this way, how long are the visits?
Generally, half or 20 minutes to half an hour.
Now, after you visited with them, meaning Lyle and Erik, you gave the information to me that we're discussing here today in January of 91. Is that correct?
Objection,
92, I'm sorry.
objection, let's take some testimony.
Sustain.
Okay. Did
I had
you
a question.
did you see me again after you were here in California in June?
Yes, I did.
And when was that?
January of 1992.
And do you remember whether you gave me this information in person or on the phone? Do you
I-
recall?
Objection today, Mr. Warner.
Sustain.
The information about what happened in the basement with Lyle and his father.
I told you in person.
So the next time you would have seen me would have been 7 months after you were visiting the boys in the jail. Is that correct?
Yes.
You were asked if you had a good time in 1976 when you were visiting. Were you made to feel special then?
Yes, I was.
Did you get a lot of attention from Kitty?
A lot, yeah.
And did she have some particular interest in your appearance and your behavior?
She helped me to lose weight, which was important to me at the time. And she drove me to get my first driver's license. She introduced me to my first boyfriend. We made trips to places that are nationally known and so forth.
So that was a good time.
Yes.
Did you ever get that kind of attention or caring from her again?
No, in all honesty, no.
And you were asked if
And actually, let me mention that because somebody mentioned this earlier in the chat. Divine and Hale with Donna Clifford. I think they treated her like help to mentally defeat her because the son told her to make her lose confidence in herself so she wouldn't tell anyone. Yeah, that's a very interesting point because Lyle told Diane during the 1976 visit. So it's like this idea. I could totally see that being the case too. It's of course a bit of speculation here, but I can see that being a reasonable theory as well, that if Kitty is suddenly sees that the golden cousin, the one who was treated especially in 1976, especially in comparison to her sister Kathleen, who was there on the same trip and did not have the same experience that Diane did in 1976, that suddenly everything changed after 1976. Well, what happened in 1976? During that trip, Lyle told Diane told Kitty about the things that Jose was doing. So I can totally see that being like, you know what, let's make sure that Diane is no longer special. It is very, very clear to her where she stands in connection with this family. We are in charge here. Thank you very much. And, maybe make her intimidated and afraid of us and the things that we can do to her and to other people as well. It's entirely possible that is the case here. Also, Care Bear. I think once Kitty began essaying Lyle, she became possessive and jealous of other females around him. Very bizarre, I know. Ooh, it's weird, but you might be right about that too. Oh, God, it's like, everything about this family is just so horrifying.
If you were a guest in the home, did you always have chores to do?
Yes, there were always chores. In the last visit, it was overwhelming.
Okay, now, when it would be chores, would it be just a matter of, gee, would you mind doing the breakfast dishes, or would the projects be larger than that?
No, I was responsible for cleaning the entire house and chauffeuring the boys.
Cinderella.
I'd say pretty much daily. In the
Anybody else
evenings,
hearing that song?
and sometimes to school, and taking care of whatever yard work there was needing to be done. And
You were asked if it was your responsibility to clean up the ferret. Do you remember that?
yes, I remember the question.
And did you try to clean up after the ferret?
While cleaning, yes, if I saw it, there wasn't any specific place to clean it up, so it's hard for me to recall.
Well, was it in every room? The ferret droppings, were they in every room of the house, or did the ferret just have access to one or two rooms? Or
In the ferret room, the house.
did he get in cabinets and under
Yes.
beds and all sorts of...
Yeah, I mean, he'd show up all over the place.
How big was he?
Okay, let's move on to something else.
Okay.
You said, you were asked about the reference in the report, my wording, that you felt you had misjudged the situation with regard to the incident in the basement.
The action assumes facts not evidence that it's rewarded.
Rephrase the question.
I'm sorry,
Rephrase the question.
I didn't hear what the objection was.
As to the wording, as you've misstated the evidence.
You've told us about an incident that occurred between Lyle and his father in the basement, in which Lyle told you that they had been touching each other. Is that correct?
Yes.
And there was, you said that you thought you had misjudged the situation. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Since it was never discussed again, and due to Kitty's reaction, I took the responsibility for the way the whole thing was handled.
Well, when you told her what you thought had happened, did she seem to think that your assessment of the situation was correct, or that it was ridiculous? Did she respond in a way that showed you that she took what you had to say seriously?
No, she did not.
How did she respond?
Overall,
How did she respond?
There's a way when she does not believe you, she shakes her head, and it's just like an utter that the whole thing is absurd. And then she walked out, and that's when she went and got Lyle.
And how old were you at this time?
17.
And was Kitty someone whose opinion affected you?
Yes.
I have nothing else. Thank you.
All right, anything else? On redirect?
Well, it would have to be already read.
All right, this matter has already been gone into in great depth.
This is not on this.
Well, I'll see you at sidebar as to why this hasn't been brought up before.
Oh. Okay, well, I think that is it for that witness, unless they bring her back at some point. I don't know, but I doubt it. That's the end of the testimony on this one. Okay, so now we have Cynthia McPhee, which is going to be spicy. Okay, so this first portion here is during a hearing they're getting her testimony to see what is going to be what they can talk about in front of the jury. So we're basically gonna watch the difference between the testimony at the hearing and then the testimony in front of the jury. So let's this will be much faster.
And whoever is going to do the examination may do so. All right, step forward, please, and stand behind the court reporter.
Cynthia Dawn McPhee, MCPH.
Would you spell your first name?
CYNTHIA.
All right.
Ms. McPhee, do you know a person by the name of Jerome Oziel?
Yes.
And can you tell the court when you first met Mr. Oziel?
In 1981.
And can you tell the court under what circumstances you first met him?
I was hired as his babysitter.
And did that involve you then living in his home?
That's correct.
Where was the home that you lived in?
3744 Longridge Avenue, Sherman Oaks.
And were you a salaried employee?
Yes,
Did
I
you
was.
receive salary from him?
Yes,
for
I
doing
did.
that? What were your duties in regard to your housekeeping?
I was to look after the children, to take them to and from preschool, school, prepare meals, laundry, be a friend to the children, and be a friend to the family.
And was that including having some sort of a
more than a
relationship with Dr. Oziel?
Only as housekeeper.
Right. And how long did you remain in that position as housekeeper?
For approximately 5 years.
And during that 5-year period of time, did you continue to reside in Dr. Oziel's house?
Yes, I did.
Did you get to know Dr. Oziel on a intimate basis during that period of time?
Yes, I did.
Did you get to know people who knew him during that time?
Yes, I did.
And also his wife and children?
That's correct.
And approximately when was it that you left his employment?
In 1986, October of 1986.
And did you remain in the Los Angeles area after you left his employment?
No,
Where did you go?
I returned to Vancouver, Canada.
And did you continue to have contact with Dr. Oziel after you returned to Vancouver? And by contact, I mean telephone contact, in-person visits, or letter writing?
Yes.
And approximately for what period of time after 1986 did you continue to have contact with him?
Until 1990.
And could you tell me the nature of that contact?
There were several contacts.
Just generally tell me what those were.
They were
A phone call or in person? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. I
in
just want
phone
to know what the
call,
nature was. It phone calls, in-person visits?
in person and phone
Yeah,
calls.
thank you, incandescent.
Right?
This
And
is a different
approximately
one.
how many do you think?
That was
how many
Doodle on
phone calls
Smith,
did you
was
have
the
with
other
him
one.
from 86 to 1990?
Approximately 20.
And visits?
2.
And was there a period of time when you moved back to the house, or was that the last time you were in the house with him?
That was the last time.
And since having that contact with him, have you kept up on Dr. Oziel at all? Read things about him?
Yes, I have.
All right. And based upon your knowledge of him, do you have an opinion as to his honesty or dishonesty?
I believe that Dr. Oziel does not know the difference between truth and a lie.
Whoa.
And so do you have an opinion as to whether he's honest or dishonest?
He's very dishonest.
Now, sometime in
Yikes.
April or May of 1990, did you have a telephone conversation with Dr. Oziel which concerned his involvement in this case, that is the Menendez case?
Yes.
And can you give me your best approximation of when that telephone conversation took place?
March or April.
Of 1990?
Yes.
And where were you when you received the telephone call or placed the telephone call?
I was at 1831 McSpadden Avenue, Vancouver, BC.
And did he call you or did you call him?
He called me.
And during the course of that conversation with Dr. Oziel, did he brag to you about being a media star with reference to this case?
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
He said to watch him on television, that he would be on Hard Copy or one of those shows, that he was a media star, that he was a key witness in a murder trial, and that he was a doctor helping the people who were involved in the trial, and that reporters were around his house, outside his garage, following him all over.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you guys hate Dr. Oziel right now? Answer. This one goes to 11. Martha W., to answer your question, yes, this is a hearing about her testimony. So they're trying to figure out how much is proper to be let in. Because, you know, how much of this is going to be salient. I mean, obviously, he's not one of the defendants. He is another witness for the trial. And so this is getting to his credibility as a witness. Is he truthful? Does he have the right motivations to do what he did? So this is getting into, number one, his truth. She gave a pretty strong opinion about whether or not he's a truthful person. There's really no mistaking her opinions of him with that statement right there. And then number two, then there's also the idea that he is an unwilling witness. You know, that he was like, I was forced to do what I did, to say, you know, to come forward and all this kind of stuff. Like, I didn't want to be involved. I didn't want to be like a star witness. Who said star witness? What are you talking about? You know, like, which is definitely the impression that I have of him, is that, you know, he's this narcissistic prick who absolutely loves being the center of attention, and this idea of him being this all important witness in this huge murder trial that, of course, was like a huge deal at the time. And so obviously her testimony right here, that what she said about that phone call, that he called her out of the blue and was like, "Ooh, you should really watch the TV, watch me. I'm this important person. I'm this important witness. You definitely watch all of this. Please watch it. Please watch it. Even though we're not in a relationship anymore, please please watch. You know, like that's the impression that I have of this. Okay, anyway, let's continue.
Did he seem happy or sad?
Oh, and yes, this is not in front of the jury. So just a reminder, the jury is not here. We are going to find out what it is that she's actually going to be able to testify to in front of the jury.
About that situation.
He seemed very happy. He seemed as if he was smiling over the phone.
Objection is speculation.
All right, the objection is sustained. The answer is straight.
Can you characterize, based on the tone of his voice and your knowledge of him, whether he had any reaction to his involvement in being a media star?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yes. Based on your knowledge of his voice and the content of the conversation, could you get any sense as to whether he was happy or sad or had any attitude about his involvement in the case as a media star?
Objection calls for speculation, no foundation.
Overall.
Yeah, he's laid a foundation.
He was happy, and I based my opinion on the fact that he was laughing. He seemed very happy about it.
Thank you. That would be the offer.
All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. McPhee, you indicated that you started to work for the Oziels in 1981, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did Mrs. Oziel hire you as a babysitter?
That's correct. I think it was both of them together. She initially hired me, but it was on his approval.
Okay, she actually did the hiring.
That's correct.
And you stayed with the Oziels for 5 years?
That's correct.
When you left, you stole some property from them, isn't that correct?
No, that is not correct.
Do you recall the grand theft police report?
Oh.
Yes, I do.
In 1986, were you arrested on that, based on that report?
Yes, I was.
And that was for grand theft?
That's correct.
Did your case go to court?
Yes, it did, but I don't believe that was 1986. I believe I was living in Los Angeles at the time.
Were you arrested more than once?
Yes, I was.
How many times were you arrested based on reports by the Oziels?
Twice.
Oh,
And what were they for?
One was for vandalism and one was for grand theft.
oh, what?
Oh, excuse me, 3 times.
Okay, vandalism, grand theft, what else?
Theft of 2 suitcases.
Oh, what? Can I get details? I want to know what happened.
Was that when you left in 1986? You
That's
took
correct.
cases with you?
That's correct.
Prior to that, you had 2 other arrests by LAPD, is that correct? Based on reports
I think those are just the ones I just spoke of.
vandalism and grand theft.
That's correct.
What was the vandalism?
For breaking a window in the Oziel home,
And what was the grand theft?
for stealing a car, stealing the Oziel's car.
Now,
Wait, what?
did all of these offenses occur in 1986?
No,
The theft of the 2 suitcases, was that in 1986?
that's correct.
When was the vandalism?
I'm not really quite sure. 1981, 1982.
And the grand theft?
I'm not sure also. Maybe 84, 85.
And that was of a car?
That's correct.
I just, I'm sorry. She worked for them for 5 years, and like throughout, they were like calling the cops on her for like stealing the car and throwing things through windows, and like, I don't. Yeah, like Care Bear. She says all of this like she has major T on it. Yeah, she's very matter of fact about it, almost like hell yeah I did it, and yeah, oh no, it wasn't 2 times, it was a 3rd arrest. It's like it's almost as if like these were like I almost feel like these were all instances where she was like exacting revenge on them or something, like she was mad at them for doing something to her. She was mad at Dr. Oziel for treating her in a particular, like that's the like place that my brain is going to based on the information and her delivery on top of that. And the fact that like we're getting these gaps of information that I'm just like, I want to know what happened. Like, can we please get this information for like what happened? Like, tell me the story. I need to know. Okay. Again, this is not in front of the jury.
And you've indicated that you've been watching Dr. Oziel or reading about Dr. Oziel, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And you knew that he was going to be on TV?
No, I did not.
You did not?
No.
Do you know 2 women by the name of Judelon Smith and Alice Corey?
I know one of them. I know both of them, but I've never met one of them.
You have been on Diane Sawyer, have you not?
On Diane Sawyer?
Yes.
You mean
Prime
Prime
time? I'm sorry, prime time.
Yes.
When was that?
I believe it was September of 92.
92?
Excuse me, is that a question?
Is that correct?
I'm not sure. Well, I believe so. I'm not sure on the date.
Prior to going on prime time in September of 1992, did you ever talk to Judelon Smith or Alex Curry?
I spoke with Alex Curry once.
When was that?
In 1986 or 1988, sorry.
And to Judelon Smith?
In 1991.
1990 or 91?
I'm not, 91, I would say.
Now, you spoke to each of these women before you ever went on prime time, isn't that correct? Before you were ever interviewed for that?
No, that is not correct.
When were you interviewed for prime time?
July of
I'm
9.
going to object at this point is going way beyond the offer of proof. Yes, we can open all this up.
Okay, counsel, let's not argue it. Objection is sustained. Why don't you confine yourself to the area of the inquiry here?
Judge,
Yeah,
would I clarify one point?
Yes.
Which is, I wasn't objecting here because I assumed the court wanted to hear where it was going in the cross-examination. And I would have some comments about this general line of attack, but I didn't wish to be understood as waiving objection.
Okay. All
I
right.
thought the court wanted to hear.
Yeah, but I don't want to go into extensive examination.
I'm just trying to ascertain how she got certain information.
Why don't you ask her that?
Okay, let's not speak with each other on the record here. If you have something to address the court, you can do that. Otherwise, you can
Leslie.
speak quietly among yourselves. All right. your
Decorum,
next question.
Leslie. Decorum.
Ms. McPhee, do you hate Dr. Oziel?
Yeah. Sounds
I
like it.
dislike him strongly.
Ms. McPhee, did you call and threaten Dr. Oziel sometime in August of 1990?
Um, no, that is not correct.
Do you
What
remember
was that
a
reaction?
phone call?
What was that reaction? It was like she had the memory. She had the memory of like what happened, and then she laughed. Either because it's like because she's like, you know, like what I did was pretty funny, or she's like, oh, that's ridiculous that someone would call that a threat, but leave it to Dr. Oziel to call that a threat. I don't know, like, but that was like such a funny like giggle, and I still want more information. I feel like we're not gonna get it.
Between yourself and Dr. Oziel about August 30th, 1990?
Yes, I do.
Have you heard that tape?
No, I have not.
What do you remember about that conversation?
I asked Dr. Oziel if he was taping the conversation, and I was swearing a lot, and I was yelling a lot, and I was bringing up issues of the contents of our relationship and questioning him. Basically, that was what the tape was about.
You had a sexual relationship with him?
That's correct.
And at some point, he broke off the relationship with you, isn't that correct?
No, that's not correct.
At some point, you stopped having sexual relations with him?
Yes.
And was
All
that
right, this is
1986?
basically all covered in that Exhibit 173, Mr. Kuriyama.
Ms. McPhee, didn't you say on the tape that in response to Dr. Oziel telling you to quit threatening him, to quit calling him, you said that you were going to, quote, fuck him up the ass, unquote?
Well, I'm going to object to this. You know, we asked counsel before this hearing to hear the tape, and Mrs. Bazan said, I'm not going to use the tape. I'm not going to use the tape. And she came over and told us what was on it. So,
Your Honor, I believe I'm handling this witness.
Okay, again, it doesn't matter what's on the tape, it's what she said, so why don't you rephrase the question?
Did you say in this conversation that we're speaking about
Mm-hmm.
that you were going to, quote, fuck him up the ass?
I could have.
And
I swore a lot on that tape.
you were upset.
I was very upset.
And you-
I didn't know actually he was taping it. I just assumed he was taping it because he had taped a conversation prior to that. So I just assumed that he was taping it because the way he was talking sounded as if he was taping it. His questions,
In
his,
fact, you admitted to
I don't think she
the grand
finished her
theft
All right,
on
Chief.
that tape, correct?
I have no idea. I haven't heard the tape. I don't know what's on it. I don't know what I said. I said a lot of things, I'm sure.
And he had called you in response to some threatening phone calls by you, isn't that correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did you ever make any calls threatening?
No, I have not. It all depends on what you mean by threats also. What does threats mean?
Had you called him prior to this particular phone call?
In what year? Like, what?
This is 1990, on or about August 30th.
No,
You did not call him?
before 1990. Is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
I called him.
I'm going to object on the question stage. She needs to know what's between 86.
Okay, counsel, let's not argue.
Really quick, Brittany Chanel. I just thank you so much. Says this is a little bit of a side point, but says hello LB. I recently lost my dad last Saturday night. Watching this live stream is helping me get my mind off of things. I am so sorry. I am so sorry to hear that. That is so hard. And our parents are only there for a certain amount of time, and they hold a very, very special role in our lives. And I am so sorry to hear that you have lost yours. So I don't want to dwell too much on it, because as you say, the live stream is helping you get your mind off of things. So dwelling on it would do the opposite, I guess. But I appreciate that you have chosen to come here to take your mind off of your grief and your sorrow. And I am so sorry. I want to give you the warmest hugs and all the love in the world as you go through that. But yes, thank you for choosing to be here. And I hope that this does help you help to distract you for a little bit of time and give you a little bit of respite from the emotional burden of that grief. So love and hugs. And also, just because, thank you so much for gifting 5 Legalbytes memberships to folks in the chat. That is so kind and so generous of you. We've got some wonderfully generous people today. And I'm pretty sure you've done that several times before too. So Maya Johnson, Mary M, Haley Mouse, Maria Brooks, and B, welcome to Bite Club, or welcome back to Bite Club. I know that some of you have been in it before. So wonderful. Thank you so much. And let's get back to this crazy witness that is just like, I feel like I'm getting whiplash because of like all of the like directions that this is taking. It's just like this picture is just so bizarre at this point. All right, let me just for context, I'm going to move back just a little bit here also.
No.
You did not call him?
Before 1990, is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
I called him.
Well, I'm going to object on the question today. She needs to know it's between 8 and 6.
Okay, counsel, let's not argue. Why don't you re-ask the question?
Very well, yeah. Just prior to August 30th, 1990, had you made threatening phone calls to Dr. Oziel?
No.
Had you made any phone calls to Dr. Oziel?
Yes.
How many phone calls did you make?
I'm going to object again.
But that's like a 10-year
Vegas time.
Overall, she was answering it. It's a 10-year period.
That's a 10-year period of time. I'm sure I called him lots of times in a 10-year, period of time.
Just prior to this August 30th, 1990 conversation,
Mhm.
did you call him?
No.
You did not?
No.
When was the time previous to this August 30th, 1990 conversation that you had called him?
I called him on a number of occasions.
When was the time just before August 30th, 1990?
I don't recall. I couldn't give you a specific date.
Can you say whether it was in a month, 2 months?
No, I couldn't.
You recall in this conversation that he asked you to quit calling him and threatening him and said enough is enough, and you stated enough is never enough for you.
No, actually, that was Alex Curry who called me and told me that she was Jerry's fiance and to stop calling. And that was in about 1988, and that's the only time I spoke with Miss Curry.
All right, again, we're getting far afield here. Let's wrap it up.
This sounds like Jerome Oziel
he's. I have nothing further.
All right. All right, did the defense wish to be heard?
Well, then, if the
Like,
court allowed that
moving around him.
cross-examination, the way this would play out would be, with the court's permission, of course, would be we would ask her why she has this dislike for Dr. Oziel. I wouldn't intend to go into explanations for every one of those incidents that Mr. Kuriyama brought out, which would seem to fall into the category that the court was concerned about collateral impeachment. But even if the court allowed that cross-examination, I still think I could redirect her in a way that would not take a lot of time, that we briefly covered the areas that he covered in his cross-examination. And without getting as much further that he wanted in his cross-examination.
Well, let me ask the prosecution, if you cross-examine the witness and asked her whether you dislike or hate Dr. Oziel, and she says, yes, I dislike him intensely, and it's left at that. How is the prosecution harmed by leaving it at that? The defense has brought out their character evidence, and you've impeached her by her animosity, and that's the end of it.
You have a moment,
Yeah. Or you may step down.
Okay, so now they're going to argue about the relative probative value of her testimony versus the prejudicial impact of her testimony, and the possibility that this is just going too far down a rabbit hole for this case, because it's like, he's not a defendant. This isn't like, this is, she's being brought in to essentially rebut Dr. Oziel in a number of ways, his character, his credibility, right? Is he an honest person? Has he been dishonest in the past? Has he, how has he blurred the lines between employment and patient and lover in the past in all of these various ways? I mean, it seems like it just takes too much energy to be Dr. Oziel, really. Like, he's got all of these different relationships that he's managing at the same time as he's like managing and running his own practice and raising kids at the same time, and he's still married to his wife, who seems to know about all of these different relationships. It's just like, it just seems like, how do you have the energy for it? I don't understand. Like even just like ignoring the morality and the ethics of like being Dr. Oziel. I don't get it, man. I don't pretend to get the first bit of it. Okay, so let's get to what she actually does testify to in front of the jurors. I've got a timestamp here for it. 2:09. I think this should be.
Otherwise, everyone's.
We're going to preclude her from asking us.
Yes, that's just argumentative. Everyone ready now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, all the jurors are back in court and we're ready to resume. I'm sorry for the delay, ladies and gentlemen, but we're now ready to proceed. The defense may call its next witness. Okay.
All right.
And you're.
Cynthia McPhee, MCPHEE.
Ms. McPhee, tell the jurors where you live.
I live in Vancouver, BC.
At British Columbia in Canada?
That's correct.
Are you a Canadian citizen?
Yes, I am.
And were you born in Canada?
Yes.
And did you live there from the time you were born until about 1981, roughly?
Yes.
In 1981, did you have occasion to move from your home in Vancouver down to the Los Angeles area?
Yes, I did. Yes.
And when you got down here to the Los Angeles area, did you eventually take a job with a person by the name of L. Jerome Oziel?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember approximately when you first took a job with Mr. Oziel?
Approximately May of 1981.
And how old were you at that time?
I was 18.
And what was the job that you took with Mr. Oziel?
Fairly young.
Babysitter, housekeeper.
And what did that job involve in terms of your duties?
I'm taking care of the children, taking them just to preschool, school, making meals, doing household duties and errands.
Was that a live-in job?
Yes, it was.
And where did you live during the time that you worked for Mr. Oziel?
At 3744 Long Ridge Avenue.
And did you actually live inside the house with
Yes.
Mr. Oziel and his family?
Yes.
Where physically in the house did you have your room or your living space?
In the back bedroom.
And was that part of the house
Yes,
where
it
the
was.
Oziel family lived?
Yes, it was.
And how long did you hold that position?
Until October of 1986.
So from 1981 until 1986, you were living inside the Oziel household? Is that
That's correct.
And during that period of time, did you come to know Mr. Oziel and his family?
Yes, I came to know them very well.
And how
Well,
would
too
you
well, some might say.
characterize how well you got to know Mr. Oziel?
I got to know him as well as anybody could know him. I got to know him very intimately.
And when you left your
we
employment
gonna say it?
in 1986, where did you go after you left the Oziel home?
I went to Vancouver, British Columbia.
And from that point in 1986 up until today, have you remained in Canada,
That's correct.
living up there?
Yes.
Okay. Had you maintained contact with Mr. Oziel after 1986 when you left his employment, living in his home?
Yes.
And could you describe for the juries what the nature of that contact was, just in terms of whether it was person-to-person meetings or visits, or what exactly it involved in the period between 1986 and following?
I saw him in person twice, and I talked to him on the phone on numerous occasions.
And besides having contact with him, have you kept up with information regarding Dr. Oziel?
Yes, I have.
Do you feel that you have an intimate knowledge of Dr. Oziel as a person?
Absolutely.
And when you were living in the house with Mr. Oziel, would you see him on a daily basis?
Every day.
And would you see him interacting with his wife?
Yes.
And would you see him naked?
Would you see him interacting with his children?
Yes.
And were there times when you were with him by yourself for long periods of time?
Yes.
Are we going to get
Both
into
inside
detail?
the house and outside the house?
Yes.
Did you also have occasion to see him interacting with other people outside the home?
Yes.
And
I don't think
based
they're gonna
on your
say it.
knowledge of Mr. Oziel, both in living in his home for a period of 1981 to 1986, and also based on keeping in contact with him after that period of time, do you have an opinion as to whether he is a dishonest or an honest person?
He is the most dishonest person I've ever met.
Oh,
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Oh, so that's why she volunteered that earlier when she was like, I knew him in about as intimate a way as anyone could possibly know him. Like this was her way of wink wink nod nod elbow nudge. I knew him in all of the ways in which you could know a person. Because I think that probably what the judge decided in the argument, that followed her hearing testimony was probably that, we can't allow her to testify that she was his ex-lover, because that's going to open up a whole can of worms that is going to be going down the rabbit hole. So that was what he limited from her testimony, which I think, if you're paying attention, I feel like you could connect the dots if you're the jury. Yeah. I think the jury could connect the dots based on what we have heard from Dr. Oziel himself so far. Spicy nonetheless. Now for some cross-examination.
One additional question.
Oh, okay.
Do you like or dislike Dr. Oziel?
I dislike him very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, cross-examination.
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. You may
Yeah.
sit down.
They
Here, let me-
probably determined that they were like, there's really nothing that we can ask here on cross-examination that's going to be particularly helpful, and also will not open up that can of worms that we do not want opened up. So that is the end of Cynthia McPhee. And now we are, that was just short and sweet. Now we are moving on to Charles Wadlington. Okay, and we'll see how much of his testimony we can get through today. Okay.
Charles E. Wadlington, Sr., Wadlington.
All right.
Mr. Wadlington, where do you live?
West Palm Beach, Florida.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a financial advisor.
And before becoming a financial,
Isn't that like what the last tennis coach said? That he was like, "Yeah, I'm a financial advisor," or something along those lines. Like he wasn't like being a tennis coach was like a temporary gig or something. I don't know.
advisor, were you at some point a tennis coach in your life?
Yes, I was.
And when did you first start coaching tennis?
1973.
And at that time, were you in Florida or somewhere else?
Lake Placid, New York.
Did you?
Could we adjust the microphone?
Yes, we'll have the bailiff come up here and do that.
Whew. I can recover from that spice a little bit.
You said you began coaching in Lake Placid, New York,
Yes,
and roughly the year
73.
73. And did you coach in other places besides Lake Placid?
Yes, I did.
And what were those places?
After Lake Placid, then after graduating from college, I went to Columbia, South America for 2 years. Then I was in Florida for about 6 months. And then I went to Princeton, New Jersey, and I was there for 5 years.
And do you know roughly the time period that you were in Princeton, New Jersey?
Yes, May of 81 through December of 85.
And during that time period, did you have occasion to meet members of the Menendez family?
Yes, I did.
And could you tell us in what capacity you met them?
The first time was at the Hamilton Tennis Center in Hamilton, New Jersey in May, around the 15th of May. And I met them there when they brought the boys to take lessons.
By the way,
the last time I saw Erik was in March of 85.
all right.
And Lyle was in October of 86.
And is it true that your coaching stopped in 85 and you saw Lyle in 86 because you played tennis with him?
Yes.
Were you an avid tennis player yourself in addition to being a
Yes.
coach? Were you a good tennis player or just
I was ranked.
tell a juries what that means?
At that time, I was number one in the open professionals in singles and doubles in New Jersey. And I had also been in the top 100 in the world.
Because Jose only
And
one
how
of the
much
best.
coaching experience did you have when you first came into contact with the Menendez brothers?
To that point, I'd given about 20,000 lessons.
And who was it that hired you to give these lessons to the brothers?
I'd been brought to New Jersey by a guy named Roger Wooten, but Mr. Menendez had hired me through Roger Wooten.
Was the first time you met anyone in the Menendez family Mr. Menendez?
Actually, I met all four of them. All four of them came together to the Hamilton Tennis Center the first time I met them.
And who, if anyone, did the talking in terms of dealing with you?
Mr. Menendez.
And what was the arrangement, if any, that you made with Mr. Menendez?
Well, actually, I was just to give the kids drills and private lessons, but the original arrangements were made through the other guy, Roger Wooten, who was my employer, and then I gave the lessons.
And where would these lessons take place?
In the early stages, it was at the Hamilton Tennis Center, but we were not there long, and then we went to the Nassau Racket and Tennis Club where they continued. And then I also gave them tennis lessons at the Hopewell Valley Tennis Club and at the Hopewell Valley High School and at their house.
And did you, during the period of time that you were giving lessons at those places, come to know the Menendez brothers quite well?
Very well.
And did you also come to know their parents very well?
Not as well as I knew the boys, but I did get to know the parents.
Did you have interactions with Jose Menendez specifically?
A few.
And could you describe for us what the nature of those interactions were?
Well, most of the time it was like debate over technical issues about how tennis should be taught and differing opinions on the way that people should be trained in the sport.
Did you and Mr. Menendez have a basic disagreement on the philosophy of how someone should be taught in the sport?
Yes.
What was his philosophy and what was yours?
Well, his philosophy, as far as I knew, was that the boys should be trained very, very hard and pushed as hard as they could go. And basically, his attitude was that he wanted them to try to do things in the development of their game ahead of what I thought was the chronological order of how someone should be taught and progress.
When they came to you, I'm referring to the brothers, came to you, were they advanced players?
No,
Did Jose Menendez think they were advanced players?
no, they were beginners.
And
They were just starting.
when you say that his philosophy was that he wanted them to progress at a different stage than what you had in mind, what do you mean by that?
I was speaking of, that was after the original meeting. At first, it was just like all the other kids. They were in the program. We had a lot of kids. And so we, basically they started out with the other kids at their same skill level, but then they did progress faster. So then we started giving them a little more individual attention.
Did he want you to give them any preferential treatment above the other kids?
Yes.
And how did he indicate that?
He wanted me to give them all my attention.
And did he indicate why he wanted you to give them all your attention?
Just because he wanted it.
Did he indicate why he was pursuing these tennis lessons? Was this
He just wanted them to be good.
for what purpose then?
Also speculation.
If you know. In other words, if he indicated to you why he wanted them to be good.
The only indication of why he wanted them to be good was that it was family tradition to excel.
All right. And when you say your basic disagreement with him was that he pushed them too hard, did you say?
Yes.
Could you explain to me what you meant by that?
Well, I feel that he thought that
Objection, this is speculation.
Speculation. I knew it.
But without reference to your feelings, could you tell me
Well, without
what he
reference to
said to
his
you
thought.
in terms of his philosophy?
that they should just practice as much as possible, and that I should work them very, very hard, and that I should teach what he wanted me to teach.
Was it his philosophy that he was having them taught so that they would enjoy the game as a game, or was there a disagreement about that?
That there was disagreement.
What was the disagreement there?
He wanted them to play for results, and I wanted them to play tennis as a art form and for the beauty of the game.
And who won out in this dispute as to
Okay, then.
the philosophy of what
Andy
you were
Jose.
doing there?
I don't know if there was a winner. When they were with me, we did it my way. When they were with other coaches, they did it his way. And then when he was there, when I was teaching them, then we had confrontation.
And could you describe the nature of those confrontations?
Basically, a superioristic attitude that I didn't know what I was talking about. And I was very self-confident at that time and thought that I knew exactly what I was talking about because I'd produced already a couple of world-ranked players, and I didn't want his interference.
By the way, did he have any experience as a tennis coach?
No,
Would he be telling you how to do your job?
he tried.
Pardon?
He tried.
And what was your reaction to that in terms of how you dealt with it?
Well, I told him to stay out of it and let me do the coaching.
And did he?
Nope.
No.
Would you explain what you mean by that? Were there further confrontations?
Well,
or-
yeah, I'd try to explain to Joe,
You say Joe, is that?
Mr. Menendez, I'm sorry. I would try to explain to the father how to best train a child so that they can progress and not only win, but also develop as a person.
Did he want you to teach the boys methods of cheating or playing unfairly in the game?
He had me teach them all psychological ways to disrupt the opponents, both subversive and openly.
And is that part of this game of tennis?
No.
I mean, is that the normal way in which the game is played legitimately?
No, but at the top, it is a cutthroat game. And a lot of these parents do that, but it is not the way it should be done.
Was that basically a win at all costs type of attitude that he was conveying to you, or was there some other attitude? Or was there some other attitude he was conveying?
Objection overruled.
Go ahead.
Yes, it was, the total focus was put on winning.
And were there other aspects of the game that he would be stressing besides these psychological ploys?
Objection, Ms. Dixie. I'm not sure.
Why don't you rephrase the question?
All right. But was he emphasizing in your disputes with him these psychological ploys that he wanted taught?
Sure.
And besides trying to emphasize that, were there other things that he was insisting that the boys be taught in terms of how the game should be played or
Yes.
what the techniques were of play? Would you describe what those were?
Well, yes, he, at a very young age, he wanted them to try to play like how they play on TV and hit winners.
Hit winners.
Yes.
Could you describe what that means for those of us who don't know the game?
Hitting a winner is when you hit the ball so hard and to a section of the court that the opponent can't touch it. And it has a very low probability of success.
So why was that not a good thing, if it was not a good thing, to be teaching a kid who was just starting out in the game?
Because they should learn consistency first and conditioning. And then the winners come from running the opponent out of position. And it's a very low percentage, maybe 10%. Do you actually hit a ball that the opponent can't touch?
And is it like in baseball where you hit a home run, basically?
Yes.
So he's teaching at that level. He
Right.
wants them to be hitting the home runs right from the beginning.
But on every shot.
And are you basically telling him, let's stick with the basics before you move up?
Right. I was emphasizing consistency, and there is a definite pattern of how you're supposed to play. For instance, hitting the ball from cross court, corner to corner, was basically the first thing you need to learn, both sides. And when I tried to explain that to Mr. Menendez, he just sloughed it off and said, well, that's not the way we're going to do it.
Now, did this basic disagreement between the two of you last throughout the whole 5 years that you were coaching the boys?
Yeah.
And did it eventually end in you being fired by Mr. Menendez?
Yes.
Do you know why you got fired?
Because I stood up to him and I told him that he needed to back off because he was pushing them too hard and it was making them unhappy. And it wasn't that I had seen other students not make it because of this type of pressure, and that he should let me do the coaching and that he should just be the father.
And what was his reaction to you as the coach after teaching them for 5 years, giving him this advice?
He just said I was naive and that I was fired.
And he just dismissed you at that point?
Yes.
Now, during the 5 years that you taught the boys, did you see them and deal with them and interact with them out of the presence of Jose Menendez?
Yes.
What were the boys like, just in terms of their basic personalities and their dealing with you?
Their personalities were good. They were two of my favorite kids. They were nice kids. They were very respectful. They were never disrespectful.
In the game of tennis, are there cutthroat competitor types who play this game?
Definitely.
And were either of the brothers of that type, in your opinion? Just in terms of how they were relating to the game?
No.
How were they different?
They wanted to play the game, I think, the way I wanted them to. but they couldn't
Why?
because they had to play the way their father wanted them to play.
And what did you see in terms of your impressions of the result of that problem, if I can characterize it at that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
What did you see in terms of their dealing with that situation, in terms of the father wanting them to play one way and you telling them that's not the way to play?
What was their reaction?
Yeah.
Well, they had no reaction. They had to do what he said.
And so is it true that you were coaching them one way, father's telling them to do it the other way, and they're basically following their father?
Yes, I feel that I was coaching them differently than the other coaches even that they had. I believe the other coaches were doing exactly what Mr. Menendez told them to do. He would tell the coach what to do, what to work on, what strokes to practice on, what shots to practice, how long to practice, how hard to run them, and all of that. But I tried to do all that myself.
Now, did either of the brothers ever complain about their parents and the way they were being treated?
Just that they were tired.
Tired?
Yes.
Did you work them hard? Physically work them hard?
Very hard.
And tell me what the routine would be in terms of how you would work them.
Well, we generally practice for 2 hours in a row, and we wouldn't take any breaks, and we would not take water breaks, and I would run them nonstop for 2 hours, working every stroke.
And was that the way that Jose Menendez wanted them worked?
Yes.
By the way, this is in 1981 you began, correct?
Yes.
If Erik was born in 1970, he would have been 11 years old at that time.
Yes.
And if Lyle was born in 1968, he would have been 13.
Yes.
And how long did that sort of work schedule maintain itself? Was that through the entire 5-year period?
Yes.
So for 5 years, you were working them at that level?
Yes.
Did you, during that period of time, get to know Mrs. Menendez at all?
Yes.
And what impressions did you form of her in terms of her interaction with the brothers?
She was unhappy.
And could you describe why you say that?
Well, she was always, it was obvious. She was always going around with a sour look on her face, and I could tell that she resented.
Speculation.
Sustained. As far as the portion of the answer, I could tell that portion is stricken. Next question.
Could you tell me if you saw her getting mad in the presence of the brothers?
You could tell that she was mad.
And how could you tell she was mad?
She would frown and make ugly faces.
Like what kinds of faces?
Just scowls.
And when would these faces be made? Under what circumstances?
Just about every time I saw her. In every circumstance.
Did she ever express happiness of what she was doing in the circumstances you saw her in?
No.
What were those circumstances? Where would you see her and what would she be doing?
I saw her when she'd bring the kids to and from the club, and when I went to the house, I'd see her there. And those were basically the only two places that I saw her.
And did she seem happy in her relationship with her sons?
No.
Not at all?
No.
Did you ever see her in a happy moment with either Lyle or Erik Menendez during the 5 years that you were connected with that family?
No.
And if you could you characterize her overall mood when you dealt with her?
Usually sarcastic and hostile.
Sarcastic and what?
Hostile?
And in what ways was she hostile?
She was just angry.
At you or at the boys or at something else?
I don't know.
Life in general? Or
I don't know. She was just angry.
how would she
Upset.
How would she express her hostility?
Usually sarcasm.
Toward you?
Toward anybody, me included.
Including her sons?
Yes.
And how would she express that sarcasm to her sons? Could you give me an example of that?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times if they asked her a question, she'd humiliate them with sarcasm. Something to the effect like, if you don't know that, you're stupid.
Jesus.
And what kind of questions would they ask? Just the kinds of questions kids at that age
Anything.
ask.
They never got an answer.
And her response would be, when they ask these questions, if you don't know that, you're stupid.
Yeah, or if you don't know that, you're naive.
I mean, that sounds like something that, like, I almost wonder if she just didn't know the answer. And so she felt uncomfortable about the fact that she didn't know the answer to the questions that they were asking. I mean, this is like, obviously, I don't have details about the circumstances of these, but like, it could be that she didn't know herself. And so she decided, well, to like quell my feeling of insecurity here, I'm just going to put them down. Yikes.
This is the
Overall, you were answering the question. Did you finish your answer?
Yes, sir.
You were stupid or naive.
Yes.
Was that her basic attitude towards you as well?
I didn't think so. I thought she and I had a pretty good relationship, if that was possible.
Did the boys seem different out of the presence of their parents than they did in the presence of their parents?
Yes.
What was the difference?
They had no personality when they're with their parents. And when they were with me, they were nice, normal kids.
No personality in what sense?
Showed no emotion at all.
Were the brothers
Almost like they weren't allowed to show
sophisticated
emotion.
in your view?
Yes.
In what way?
They were classy kids.
Were they immature or mature?
They were mature.
And how about your interactions with Jose Menendez? Did you see him interact with the brothers, with his sons?
I saw him practice with them once in a while.
And what would those interactions be like?
Well, I thought they were ridiculous because he was out there trying to coach them. And he was saying all the wrong things and doing all the wrong things.
Would they be confrontational in any way?
No, not confrontational. They did exactly what he said.
And when you say they did exactly what he said, was there a certain military style to the way in which this family was conducted, or a certain corporate style?
Sustained.
If you could you characterize the way the family was run based on your observations of the family during that 5-year period of time?
Oh, yeah. It was run sort of like his business. And he would give the orders and they would follow them.
And are you literally saying he would give orders? Or
Yes.
How do you mean that?
Well, I mean, they would have tasks in practice and they were written down and they had to do it.
And these written orders would be given to them?
They would be given to Mrs. Menendez and she would carry them out. And then they would have their own, like, do this much studying, do this much practicing, run this many miles on a daily basis.
And these would all be written down by Jose Menendez and the orders would be transferred to Kitty Menendez?
I don't know who wrote them down.
But in any event, you're actually talking about a piece of paper that
Yes.
someone would have with a list of orders on it?
Yes. Tasks.
And those tasks would be followed?
Yes.
Would there be any deviation from the list?
No.
And was that an unusual event where there would be this list of tasks that had to be followed, or was that something that you saw on a regular basis in that 5-year period?
I had never seen it before.
And was it a regular event in this family?
Yes.
Did you ever discuss with Lyle Menendez what his basic philosophy was in terms of his future?
Yes.
And
Yes.
what did he tell you in that regard?
Well, he wanted to play tennis
We have a time frame for this.
Yes. But when did this discussion, in the time frame of 1981 to 1985, can you be a little bit more precise on when you had one or more conversations?
His age, is that okay? When he was about 15, he started talking about goals, career goals.
Okay.
And he wanted to open up a restaurant. He wanted to come out here, as a matter of fact, and he wanted to start a restaurant. And he wanted to follow the family tradition of being successful, and he wanted to do it on his own. And he told me how he was going to do it. And
Do it on his own in what sense?
he wanted to make it on his own. He didn't want to have any help from his family.
And he referred to the family tradition.
Yes,
Is
there's
that something that you knew, the family tradition?
yes, I heard it often.
Where'd you hear about the family tradition?
From the parents and from the children.
Was the family tradition something that Jose Menendez talked to you about on more than one occasion?
Yes,
Was it something he stressed in his conversations with you?
yes.
Where did you fit into this picture? Were you an employee, part of the family?
With the parents, I was an employee, but with the kids, I felt that we were family.
Did Jose Menendez want you to be known as the coach?
No,
Why not?
I don't know. He took all the credit himself.
Yeah, probably because
What
it's
was the
threatening to his position.
relationship that Mr. and Mrs. Menendez had, if you observe the way that they interacted?
It was a strange relationship.
How so?
Just didn't appear to be any tenderness or loving type of a romantic, passionate type of a deal. It was more of a business arrangement.
Business relationship, who was the employer and who was the employee?
Not necessarily employer-employee, but he was the boss and she would do what he said.
And in relationship to the brothers, did you ever see any love conveyed to them by the parents
No,
at any point in time during that 5-year period of time?
no.
Thank you very much.
Any examination on behalf of Erik Menendez?
Morning, Mr. Wadlington.
Good morning.
Are you nervous?
Yes.
Yes. Usually when people are rotating in the chair, it means they're nervous. Okay, try to breathe
Aw.
in between answers. It helps.
Almost like it's a
Okay.
self-soothing behavior, like we know from Spidey.
If you could explain to the jurors, I don't know how many tennis players there are there, but assume nobody knows anything about it, okay? If you could explain to the jurors what was wrong, in your opinion, with the way that Jose Menendez wanted these kids coached.
I thought it was cruel.
I'm sorry?
I thought it was cruel
Okay. Why, how was it cruel?
because they had to physically suffer.
And did these kids complain about the physical suffering?
No,
How did you know they were physically suffering?
because I knew how many hours a day they were doing.
And how many hours a day were they doing it?
All their free hours. And all day, both weekend days.
And was it your knowledge that they were playing tennis before they went to school in the morning sometimes?
Yes,
And did you coach them sometimes before they went to school?
yes.
And what time?
This is also, I almost wonder if, like, on cross-examination, he's going to be asked, did you ever see Jose or Kitty hit their sons? To try to be like, well, they never physically abused them, but like, this is 100% physical abuse. Like, making them play tennis for hours and hours and hours and hours until they are physically hurting is physical abuse. It is a physical nature of causing abuse to a person.
time would those kinds of lessons begin?
6 a.m., 6:30.
And was it within your personal knowledge that they were coached immediately after school?
Yes.
Was it within your personal knowledge that they were coached at night?
Yes.
And it was in your personal knowledge that they were coached all day long on each weekend day?
Yes.
So what free time did they have?
None. We even practiced on Christmas, holidays, every day.
Oh my God.
And did you ever, in the times that you were at the home, see them with friends?
Just once.
Once. In 4 years?
5.
5 years. And what was that circumstance?
One time another boy came to practice with Erik.
And was that the only other time you ever saw anyone that appeared to be a friend around either one of them?
Except when my nephew came and played with Lyle for a week.
This also explains why Erik and Lyle ended up with such trashy friends in high school and college, because they, they remember how Lyle at Princeton, we later realized that like all of his friends are his friends because he's like bought them fancy things and like all this kind of stuff, because they probably at that point don't know how to make good friends, how to make real friendships that are meaningful and fulfilling and all that kind of stuff. So like I can totally understand why they got into trouble with these kids, with the whole I remember how they got caught like sneaking into neighbors' houses with this like group of friends or what have you in high school. And like they didn't have good friends. Like all of the friends, quote unquote, that testified on behalf of the prosecution, they were all scummy people who then took advantage of the brothers in some form or another. And were just like, they turned out to be gross, scummy people on cross-examination. So like, I understand why, because they didn't have, like, in throughout your childhood, you are picking up skills that you will then be using later on as young adults and then as adults. And that completely gets derailed in your childhood if you don't have any time to make friends, because the activities that you are doing are so rigidly controlled. And not only that, there isn't really much of a social nature to them, because like as soon as possible, you are only working with a private coach who is dedicating his energy only to you and your sibling. And also, by the way, the activity that is being drilled into them is a very like one-on-one aggressive kind of activity, right? It's not exactly one that is social in nature. I mean, especially the way in which that Jose wanted them to learn it, according to this testimony here, which again feels very credible. Like there's nothing here that jumps out that makes me think this guy's probably lying. We'll find out in cross-examination if there's anything that comes out that, undercuts anything that he's saying. But like, so far, I believe what he's saying here, because there are bits and pieces that fit into like what other people have said, the way that he described Kitty with the grimace, with the scowl on her face, like that. We got that plenty of times through other witnesses in recent installments. So like, yeah. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling here now, but there are bits and pieces here that are really fitting together. A pretty good case for the defense, at least. Like even if, like, I could see this case if it were tried today, this is like a big question for reviewing this case at this point, right? Is like, if this case were tried today, would there be a different result? And I'm increasingly thinking yes, not necessarily because of the legal reasons, but because of the emotional reasons. And remember during the Darrell Brooks trial, remember the whole jury nullification thing came up, where it's like there's this concept that like a jury can say, yeah, that's what the law says, but like because of these other reasons, we're coming to this conclusion. Like, and so for whatever reason, Darrell Brooks thought that like that was something that could happen for him, like that like the jury would look at him and be like, oh yeah, we actually feel really bad for you. And so, you know, we're not going to convict you. This is one of those cases where I could see the jury being like, yeah, self-defense is a very, you know, like is more limited than what the defense is saying that it is, but I believe all this shit happened. and like I don't, you know, like I could see a jury being convinced along those lines.
A friend you were bringing for him.
Yes.
What about on days when one or both of the boys didn't feel well?
Didn't matter.
They had to play and be coached even when they were sick?
Yes.
Did you feel badly about what was happening in this family at the time you were coaching them?
Sustained.
What were your feelings about what was happening in this family at the time you were coaching them?
Sustained.
Why did you continue to coach them if so much that you didn't approve of was going on?
Because I cared for them.
And you're rather emotional about this even now, are you not?
Yes.
Did you feel that somehow your being there was making some kind of difference?
Sustained.
What did you think your role was?
Have you finished your question?
Well, I was trying to think of a way to.
Have you finished your question?
No.
Okay.
Start over. Okay. Did you think that your remaining as their coach had any impact upon Lyle or Erik's well-being?
Yes.
And what impact did you think your being there had?
Well, I thought it was about all they had.
In what sense? What do you mean by that?
As a friend.
Were you affectionate towards them?
Yes.
And how did you demonstrate your affection for them?
We were friendly, and we played non-tennis things, and we played with the pets. We went fishing. We listened to music. We talked about, girls and life and things like that.
When they did well under your training, how did you deal with them?
This is irrelevant.
Overall.
If they did well on a particular day in a particular practice, what would you say or do?
Well, I always said the same thing, that I'm there, good or bad. I supported them.
Did you praise them when they did well?
Not that much.
Why?
Because I was not results oriented.
So you didn't want to set that up as a system.
Right.
Were you ever physically affectionate with them? Did you hug them?
Yeah, hugged them and shook hands, and I'm not a touchy person, but to the extent that I am.
Okay. Now, you said that you never observed anything that appeared like love from the parents to the boys. Was that true of both parents?
Yes.
Did you ever hear any, and I want you to focus for a moment on Mrs. Menendez. Did you ever hear her say any loving, affectionate, praising, supportive, kind, comforting, any of those categories of words to either of her children?
No.
And concerning Mr. Menendez, did you ever hear him speaking in any kindly, supportive, loving, nice tone of voice to his boys?
No.
Did you hear the opposite from either or both of them?
Both. Sorry.
Overall.
And focusing first on Mrs. Menendez, you've told us about her response to the children if they asked her questions. What other types of things did you hear her say to her sons?
Basically just commands all the time. Do this, do that.
And did they do this and that when she told them to?
Yes.
Were you present on occasions? Well, first of all, did you go with the boys to matches when they were competing?
No.
Okay, and you never went to tournaments?
Never with any players.
Okay. So let's talk about then during the training and the teaching sessions. Would they have good days and bad days?
Ability-wise?
Yeah, days when they were performing better, playing better than others, or learning better even than other days.
Yeah, but they almost always did well. I mean, they were good students.
So, and do they always seem to be following your instruction, trying to do what you told them to do?
Mm-hmm.
Were they willing students or reluctant students?
They were willing.
Now, were there occasions when they were not playing that well for whatever reason, when Jose Menendez or Mrs. Menendez were present?
No.
So they never saw them on days they didn't play well?
They always hit the ball well.
Okay. Were there times, however, that in spite of that, one or both of their parents were being critical of what they were doing?
They were always critical.
Now, how would that work if they were playing well? What was it they were being criticized for?
The few shots that they would miss.
So any failure of any kind was criticized?
Yes.
When they would be criticized by their mother, was she specific in the sense that did she seem to understand some of the rudiments of, backhands and forehands and cross courts and stuff I don't know anything about, but I mean tennis stuff?
Not really.
When she would criticize one or both of the boys, would she say, oh, that was a lousy backhand, or that's a terrible serve, or would she focus on the actual performance?
No.
Just be sort of generalized?
Yes.
What about Mr. Menendez when he was criticizing one or both of the boys' performance? Was he specific?
Yes.
Now there are a lot of strike that. You said you had given 20,000 lessons before you even met this family, so I take it there's a lot of youngsters out there who were privately coached during the course of your career.
Well, actually, that was hours on the court.
Okay.
Lesson hours.
But focusing on, there's a lot of kids taking tennis lessons or were during your coaching career.
Yes.
And those kids have parents.
Yes.
And it's true, is it not, some of those parents are pretty overbearing?
Yes.
How would Jose Menendez compare in your experience with other tennis parents?
He was one of the worst.
And in families other families you were familiar with, when there's an overbearing tennis parent, is it typical that both parents are overbearing tennis parents?
No.
And was it therefore unusual in your experience in coaching the Menendez brothers that the mother seemed to be as critical and as involved as the father?
It was pretty unusual. Usually the mother was not the dominant criticizer.
And in this family, it's true, is it not, that Mrs. Menendez was around, I mean, as far as number of hours, was around during the day more than Mr. Menendez was.
Yes.
And so, and she was observing a lot of these lessons, was she not?
Yes.
She didn't just go stay in the house and do something while you were coaching the boys.
No.
She was there, involved.
Yes.
So did it turn out that by sheer weight of hours, She was the main criticizer. Just
Yes.
a number of hours.
Yes.
Were you ever there on occasions when Mr. Menendez would be criticizing the boys, where Mrs. Menendez would in any way intervene to protect them?
Never.
Now, you talked about the fact that the boys seem to have, everybody's getting sick, that the boys seem to have a daily, why don't we take 2 minutes, everybody coughs. A
Long
daily
era
list
before COVID.
of tasks.
I'm getting distracted by it.
Just want to wait till it seems contagious.
All right, your next question, please.
Thank you, John. You said that the boys seem to have a daily list of tasks that were set out for them by both parents, one parent. Did you know who wrote the list or who originated the list?
Mr. Menendez.
Okay. And Mrs. Menendez was the enforcer of the list, was she not?
Yes.
Did she ever allow the boys any deviation from that list to say if it was very hot or if it was raining or if they were sick or if they didn't feel like it or anything like that?
No. We, on occasion, practiced in the rain.
Did you ever hear Mrs. Menendez talking about the necessity for the boys to do what was on the list? Don't tell us what she said, but did you ever hear her talk about, oh, they've got to do this and they've got to do that?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And did she ever express to you whether her insistence that these things be done was based on fear of her husband versus her own desire that they do this stuff?
No. Sorry.
All right, the answer will remain the objection.
When you saw Mr. and Mrs. Menendez together, did Mrs. Menendez appear to be fearful of her husband?
Sustained.
Did she look afraid?
No, just unhappy.
Do you remember, Mr. Wadlington, what were the psychological ploys that Jose Menendez wanted you to teach his 11 and 13-year-old sons?
Well, there were many. If it's a big point and the ball hits the line, you'd call it out. So the other guy would get angry, have a little argument, break his concentration.
Let me stop you for a minute for the non-tennis nicks, okay? If the ball hits the line, is it supposed to be called out?
Yes. Or if you cannot clearly call it out, it should be played as good.
Okay. The tennis court has these lines, these chalk lines around it.
They're paint.
All right, painted lines around it. And in amateur tennis competition, on the level that these boys competed, there aren't those referees and people in funny things like at Wimbledon.
Only for the big tournaments and only for the finals.
Okay, in the smaller tournaments and in the non-finals, the players call the other players' shots.
Correct.
Correct. So if I'm standing in this court and you're in that court and you hit a ball at me, I can see that line, and I'm allowed to call whether the ball's inside like it's supposed to be or outside or on the line.
Correct.
Okay. So one of these ploys was to, in effect, always call the ball on the line out, even when it may be a questionable call. Is that right?
On the baseline or on the first serve.
Okay, and that's to get the other player upset.
Yes.
Because he's going to say it was in.
Right.
And he's going to think you're cheating.
Objection, lady.
Sustained.
Well,
Yeah.
Let's move on.
all right.
I'm getting
So
a
that
little
was
leady
that
there.
the purpose of that particular ploy.
To upset the opponent.
Okay, what other kinds of ploys?
stalling techniques to slow the pace of the game down to get the opponent off his game. When the opponent lost track of the score, to change the score in our favor.
Not exactly the rules of good sportsmanship. Would it be fair to say that?
Yeah.
Did you ever hear Mr. Menendez talking to his sons about the importance of good sportsmanship?
No.
Probably how to avoid it.
Yes.
Did you see any difference in the way that Jose Menendez treated his sons? Difference as between the two boys?
Yes, he gave more preference to Lyle.
And in giving more preference to Lyle, did he also express to Lyle higher expectations?
Lyle was the only one that had been given expectations.
Okay. So along with the preference was the expectations.
Yes.
And did it appear to you, looking, that he had little regard for Erik?
This is getting a little leady again.
As far as a tennis player and whether he should receive the preferential lesson time and to do well, etc., it was given to to Lyle. Excuse me.
Apart from that kind of distinction where Lyle should be given the preferential time, in the way that Jose Menendez related one-to-one to the boys, did he seem to be dismissive of Erik, focus more attention on Lyle?
Yes.
You said one of the activities you did apart from coaching with the boys was to listen to music.
Yes.
Do the words Chippendale mean anything to you?
We listened to a lot of Chippendale. Chippendale singing a lot of modern songs.
What are Chippendale for those who don't know?
For those
They're
of us
two
watching
cartoon
20 years later,
characters
30 years later.
that sing in high-pitched, fast voices.
Okay. And was this music the boys' preference?
One of their preferences. We listened to it a lot when I was at the house.
Now, that's not very sophisticated music for teenage boys, is it? Did you think that was a sophisticated choice? You described them as sophisticated. Did you mean socially sophisticated? What did you mean?
Probably in terms of
Yeah, they
what
were
you
socially
knew.
sophisticated and well-trained and well-mannered and dressed nice. And
All right, so you're talking about they had manners.
yes.
Did they seem to have much knowledge of the world or of people? Did they seem to have a wide fund of knowledge? Would this Chippendale music be playing while they were practicing?
Yes. Yes.
You said you had been told, or you heard repeatedly from Mr. Menendez's lips and from the boys about family tradition. What were you told was the family tradition?
Well, that the grandparents had won gold medals in swimming and that they should strive for that high a goal and actually to become world champion in tennis.
Did you know, Mr. Wadlington, if this story about the grandparents winning gold medals in swimming was true?
No.
Did you ever see the gold medals?
No.
Were you given the impression that they were Olympic gold medals?
Yes.
Do you know if either of the grandparents were ever even in the Olympics?
Sustain.
You said that you were not supposed to be known as their coach and that Jose took all the credit. What did you mean by that? What was he taking credit for?
I don't know. I guess their results or
You mean he was pretending to be their only coach?
Assistant.
He was taking credit for what? For coaching them?
for the
Objection, asked me.
Overall. You can answer the question. What was he taking credit for?
the results.
The accomplishments?
Yes.
So he didn't let it be known that you were their coach?
No, I was never mentioned in any of the articles or anything like that.
When you talk about the articles, did the local newspapers write up the amateur athletics in the Princeton area?
Yes.
And were both Erik and Lyle Menendez written up when they would win tournaments?
Yes.
And did the father give interviews in these articles and make comments?
I don't know.
In these articles, are you saying never mentioned that you were their coach?
No.
Was that unusual in your experience?
Sustain.
When you coached other kids who won tournaments, did your name ordinarily appear in the paper?
Sustain.
Was there a time that Erik was suffering from a physical problem with his feet?
Yes.
Is it fairly typical in tennis, in rigorous practice, that kids develop problems with their feet?
Yes.
And did you attempt to assist him in that problem?
I did help him.
And what was Mrs. Menendez's reaction following your having helped Erik?
We couldn't tell her.
What do you mean you couldn't tell?
We couldn't tell her. He said he would be punished. So we did it on secret.
All right, why don't we get more specific? What was the problem that he was having?
His big toe had a bad ingrown toenail.
And was it bleeding and painful?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Okay. And what did you do about it?
I went to the drugstore and I got some stuff called Outgrow and put it on there and told him to put it on there several times a day, and then eventually he'd be able to clip the nail.
Okay. And he told you that he was afraid to tell his mother about this?
Rephrase the question, please.
Okay. What did Erik say about this with respect to his mother?
He just said he'd get in trouble if she knew that I helped him and that she wanted to take him to the doctor and let him cut it out.
And was cutting it out, based on your own personal knowledge, painful?
Objection calls for circulation.
Yeah.
Overall.
Yeah, very painful. I'd had them myself, and the Outgrow stuff works, and there's no need to go and get your feet chopped on.
Jesus. This is the second time that we've heard testimony about Kitty taking to like a certain like ailment that is like this, the actual remedy is like you use ice for a bruise or something like that. And she's like, let's cut it open. Like, let's make it 1,000 times worse. Remember, like it was either Erik or Lyle had like some kind of a black eye because of something that hit him in the face. And then she wanted to like literally slice it open to take whatever fluids out or something. Like she's nuts, absolutely nuts.
Nothing further on.
All right. How long is your cross going to be?
Probably half an hour, 45 minutes.
All right. So let's take our lunch break and resume at 1:30, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss the case with anyone or form any final opinions about it. And we'll resume at 1:30. I will now resume with.
Okay. I think this is probably where we're going to leave it for today is at the cross-examination of this witness. It's probably a good time to take our break. And we'll resume next time with more of this testimony here. So yeah, interesting day today because of the starting with Diane here, finishing up her testimony and talking about the additional things that Erik and Lyle did that were kind of embarrassing situations for her. And then also then talking about our hearing from Cynthia McPhee, the ex-lover of Dr. Oziel, was pretty spicy and wild, and a weird sort of like change of pace after hearing from Diane also. And now from Charles Wadlington, the tennis coach. It's if I don't know, it's a very interesting sort of like modulation of like different frequencies, it feels like, in today's session. But wild day. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, or at least found it interesting or informative. I know parts of it are definitely not enjoyable, especially if they are triggering to you. But this was very interesting to me in a lot of ways. I feel like it's interesting how like you get to a certain point in a trial and you start to feel like you are really getting to know these people. Like even Erik and Lyle, even though we haven't heard from them yet, and obviously Kitty and Jose will never hear from them, but you know, like we have this picture that has been developed of them, which so far, I mean, already was not great, but it's getting worse and worse with each witness now, which is likely to happen because of the fact that we're in the defense case in chief, right? Ending the prosecution's case in chief is where we're likely to have the most positive impression of the prosecution's case at that point. And then as the defense puts on their evidence, you know, like the pendulum should switch back. You know, how far back? If it goes far back enough, then, you know, like to change your mind in favor of the defense, then that's different. But yeah, interesting stuff. And actually, I just remembered there are a couple questions here. Let's see. Sokoto says, Legalbytes, do people ever get a not guilty verdict if they just snapped? It depends. I hate to give the lawyer's answer, but it depends. I'm sure that there have been cases where someone has snapped, but there are other circumstances that have like mitigated their case. You know, it's hard to answer that like more fully without like more specific information, but I'm sure it's happened. And Mia says, can you explain battered person's defense? So we're talking about the battered woman syndrome. You know, it's obviously like that's a very gendered term. I think today we'd probably use something that's a little bit more gender neutral, like battered person syndrome. But it's, you know, it is an expanded concept of self-defense. It's basically where, you know, like the person who has been battered is basically held hostage in a violent household. And, you know, by their abuser, who is isolating and victimizing them and basically making it look like if the victim escapes, then they will be tracked down and killed, essentially. And so basically that creates a situation where they think that like the only way out is literally through their abuser. So, you know, I haven't seen, you know, this is where my litigation experience is primarily in civil litigation. You know, I did one summer internship with the public defender's office, but you know, so you know, I've seen some criminal law in action, but you know, most of my experience is in civil litigation as opposed to criminal. So I haven't actually seen the battered person's defense in action, you know, outside of this case, for example. So so yeah. I hope that answers your question a bit. And I think that's about it. Oh, Dracomi, thank you so much. Thanks for your insight. It makes it so much more interesting. Thank you. Also, you look good today, and I love your hair. I used to have long hair and would braid it to pretend I was Lara Croft. I mean, long hair is really good for braids. So it's although for me it's getting a little bit too long, in my opinion. it's now getting to the point where it's like it really is going to start interfering with things if I don't get it at least trimmed soon. But anyway, thank you so much. And thank you once again to everybody who has been watching and following along. Thank you to the mods for helping to move conversation forward and allowing for rigorous discussion for and against these different positions, right? Because this is a case where people have different opinions as to whether or not they should have been convicted. You know, this is the first trial that ended in mistrial. The second one is not recorded, unfortunately. No cameras in the courtroom, so it's all we've got to analyze here. But yeah, this has been such a fascinating case so far. So thank you to everyone who is joining me on this crazy journey of watching this entire trial in these smaller installments over time. And if you need a recap, I have started to do recaps on Instagram. So there's a link in the description below to the Instagram account for Legalbytes. So once a week, I should have one today. This last week's episode, I just got it up yesterday because I recorded the recap for it, and then it turned out to be like way too long for what Instagram would allow for. So yeah, it like accepted the upload and was like, thanks, we'll process it, and then like gave the Agatha wink from the what was the show with Black Widow, anyway, where she's like, it was Agatha all along, and she winks. Anyway, so basically gave me that wink and then just like didn't upload it or didn't publish it. So I'm going to keep them a lot shorter now. I have learned my lesson from the Instagram gods. And yeah, so there should be a recap up like later today if you guys need that. And yeah, thanks again. Thank you to everybody. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Monday and a wonderful rest of your week. And I will see you guys in the next video.